Tales for Dark Nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
Dakota lifted his gaze from the burning embers of the campfire toward the sky. Tonight, the stars were brilliant in a cloudless sky. Tree limbs, heavy with unfallen leaves, barely moved. This natural stillness normally produced a calm within him, a calmness his people expected of their medicine man. His leadership over the past 4 decades had kept his tribe fed and safe, a fate other groups did not achieve. But his intuition told him all was about to change. Tonight, dread filled his soul. He sensed the coming of an event so horrific it would tear his world apart. Stories told around a campfire by the Ancient Ones so long ago forewarned of a night like this, a night where the silence would be broken by a scream of light. As he watched the thick ribbon of stars flowing from southwest to northeast, a bright light caught his attention. Barely distinguishable among the others, its movement caused him to study it more carefully. The speed of the light crossing the sky increased, as did the intensity of the glow. When it passed overhead, he felt and heard the scream foretold by the Ancient Ones. The light disappeared behind a ridge, and the roar of a windstorm could be heard for only a few moments. Then, silence. His world returned to quiet as if nothing strange had occurred. The ribbon of stars provided enough light for him to distinguish landmarks telling him where the odd light had fallen to the ground. Covering his campfire with dirt until the glowing embers faded, he set out, determined to discover if his fears concerning this event were justified. His search took most of the night. When he topped a ridge half a day's walk southeast of his village, he saw an object below in a valley, an object he had never observed before, but one described to him long ago by the Ancient Ones. It resembled the egg of a bird, only thousands of times larger. 4 legs extended from the body of the egg to the ground, supporting its weight. The outside of the structure reflected the dim glow of the stars. Strange markings were evident on the sides. From his vantage point above the valley, he stood like a statue. How long he remained unmoving, he did not know. The eastern sky glowed with the coming of dawn, and yet he continued to direct his gaze on the strange object. Hours passed. The sun rose in the morning sky. Still, Dakota remained. With the sun directly overhead, the object vibrated and a hole appeared underneath. Dakota stepped behind a large tree to obscure his presence from whatever might emerge from the egg. To his surprise, a box with 4 tubes attached to the corners began to be lowered to the ground. His curiosity satisfied, he turned and began the long trek back to his village. He would need to explain the dangers that lay ahead. The Ancient One's predictions, heard so long ago, would finally come to pass. Flight Commander Logan O'Neill read the planet survey summary for the 4th time. The original examination of this particular planet, accomplished by an unmanned probe 100 years prior, identified it as an uninhabited M-class planet. Mineral composition contained oxygen, silicon, aluminum, iron, and calcium in almost the same percentage as O'Neill's home planet, plus an abundance of free-flowing water and flora. Mission Specialist Carol Snow looked over O'Neill's shoulder. "You've been studying this plant's profile for almost 4 hours, Logan. What's so interesting?" "I'm finding the analysis hard to comprehend. A planet of this age, with all of these resources, should have produced multicellular reptilian or mammalian life by now. I realize I'm supposed to know this, but remind me again the age of this rock?" O'Neill smiled. "This planet's star is relatively young for this section of the galaxy. It's 4 billion years younger than Sol, so maybe it hasn't had time for the proper evolution to kick in." "From what I've seen, it is beautiful. Too bad we're here to screw it up." "Not necessarily. The Foundation has learned from some of its earlier mistakes. We are not here to terraform the place, just identify its worthiness for colonization." Snow kissed his forehead. "Oh, how naive that sounds, Logan. The Foundation will colonize, conquer, and ravage this little piece of heaven in the galaxy. just like it has on other planets over the generations. Then why are you on this mission if you feel so cynical? I'm an explorer, Logan. I love discovering new things, and more importantly, I love you. She patted him on the shoulder. Besides, I find your innocent naivete charming. You're the last optimist in the galaxy. She chuckled and left the command center. He watched her leave and said under his breath, "It's not that I'm naive. I just choose to be positive about our explorations." Returning his gaze to the computer monitor, he continued to go over the previous survey of the planet. Flight engineer Nina Webb cleared her throat as she stood in the entrance to Logan O'Neill's stateroom. He looked up from his computer. "Ah, Nina, come in." "You asked to see me, Skipper?" "Yes. When is the next launch window for our rendezvous with the Hermes?" "In ship time?" "Yes." 840 standard ship hours. Nina paused and gave him a whimsical smile. "That's 35 standard days. Our mothership is, as you know, dispatching another team to one other M-class planet in this system." He nodded. "Any contingencies in case of emergencies?" "Not following you." "While I don't anticipate any trouble, but how fast can we take off if needed?" "Safely 3 hours, in an emergency 10 minutes. You expecting trouble?" Taking a deep breath, Logan shook his head. "Not at the moment, but I've seen several inconsistencies within the previous survey of this planet and our own observations." She leaned against the doorframe to his cabin and crossed her arms. "Care to share with your flight engineer?" "I think I have to. The original survey indicated the only non-plant life discovered on this planet were unicellular algae-type creatures." "I'm familiar with them." Jack did a preliminary survey around the landing site and discovered what he called ant-like creatures. "That's a far cry from algae." "I know. It took almost 600 million years for single-cell organisms to evolve into multicellular insects on our home planet." "Maybe the first survey missed them." "An assumption I suspect is correct." "So how would that cause us trouble, Skipper?" "I'm just wondering what other organisms it missed." She raised an eyebrow. "Do you think it's possible?" "I've never heard of it happening before, but there is always a first time." "You want me to pre-stage the ship for an emergency takeoff?" O'Neill shook his head. "I don't want my wariness to rub off on the crew. Just be mindful of a possible need." She stopped, leaning. "I can do that. In the meantime, we need you to sign off on our first extravehicular excursion." O'Neill watched on the command center monitor as mission specialists Carol Snow and Jack Brady lifted the PVTOL, or PVTOL, Planetary Vertical Takeoff or Landing Aircraft, away from the ship. Their destination, the top of a ridge roughly 3 kilometers to the west of their landing location. Nina Webb stood next to him. "How long for them to get there?" Jack guessed a half an hour. He wants to take it slow and observe the flora between here and the top. Battery power will give them 2 hours of flight time if he uses all 4 propellers. She nodded as she watched the drone-shaped vehicle climb to an altitude above the surrounding trees. It disappeared 2 minutes later. Using the radio, O'Neill said, "Jack, maintain voice contact as you climb." "Roger, nothing to report this early in the flight." "Don't care. Sing a song if you want." They heard a chuckle from the speaker. "Trust me, you'll regret asking." The disembodied voice continued. "From what we can see, the trees thin out the higher we go. Do we know our elevation above sea level where the ship landed?" Nina said, 1,000 meters. "Got it. Lift is steady, maintaining current power usage." "Good. Wait a minute, Skipper. We're coming up on a USO." "What do you mean, an unidentified stationary object?" "I can tell you it didn't occur naturally." "Then what the hell is it?" "I'll be damned." "Jack." Dakota handed the pipe to the man on his left. Denali, a tall and handsome warrior, accepted the object and inhaled deeply. He then passed it to his left and exhaled. The smoke dissipated as it rose with the heat of the fire. "The spirit warrior has spoken to me, O great medicine man." "What has he told you, Denali?" "We are to face great obstacles. The appearance of the giant egg is an omen." "Yes." He watched the pipe pass from one warrior to the next. He continued, "How do we cast out the giant egg, Denali?" "We must do what our ancestors did, beseech the sun and stars to strike out at our invaders." With a knowing nod, Dakota asked, "What do the rest of you warriors suggest?" A murmur arose, and the shaman sitting directly across from Dakota raised his head, his image flickering in the light of the fire. "The Ancient Ones foretold of this day, my brothers. They tell us of a previous visit by these flying eggs. 100 winters ago, one visited our world, and our ancestors isolated it until it rose again into the sky and disappeared." Denali spoke in his baritone voice. "We must destroy this one. We cannot allow it to return again." The shaman closed his eyes and started chanting. Dakota listened and then spoke above the rising tempo of the warriors joining the song. "Brothers." No one responded. He tried again, this time louder. "Brothers." The interior of the teepee grew quiet. "Brothers, Denali is correct. The last time one visited our world, it was allowed to go free. Now another has arrived. The Ancient Ones were right to warn us of this day. We must not betray the trust they have bestowed upon us." The warriors joined together in a chant as Dakota stood. He allowed them to continue for several minutes. Finally, he raised his hands. Silence ensued. "Prepare yourselves for a possible long journey. I will travel to the home of the Ancient Ones and seek their guidance. When I return, we will know what to do about the egg from the sky." "Skipper, it looks like the skeleton of an ancient teepee. The upright posts are tied together at the top and only tattered cloth remains attached to the poles." O'Neill closed his eyes and exhaled. "Landon confirmed, Jack." "Roger that." Nina placed a hand on his arm. "Skipper, this can't be." He shot a quick glance at her. "Why not? We've been lied to before. What makes this situation any different?" "This planet is not supposed to be inhabited." "So we were told." Neither Nina or O'Neill spoke as they listened to Brady land the PV-TOL. They heard both Carol and him securing the aircraft from flight mode. Brady said, "Carol, stay with the PV-TOL. Leave the rotors on idle and I'll check this out." "Roger." Silence ensued on the speaker for several minutes. The next song came from a winded and excited Jack Brady. "Skipper, this damn planet has intelligent life on it." "Take a breath, Jack, and then explain." "Inside the teepee poles was a charred area surrounded by a circle of rocks. Animal remains were also nearby. I would swear they belonged to a rabbit and several birds." O'Neill took this information and stared out the command center viewport. Finally, he said, "Collect samples of the remains and return to the ship." "Roger." Paul Weaver, the ship's pilot and communication engineer, crawled up the ladder into the command modular. "Hey, Skipper, we're getting a distress call from the Hermes." O'Neill fixed his attention on the man. "Put it on speaker." The pilot went to a communications console and flipped a switch. A disembodied voice said, "Repeat, Hermes 1, this is Hermes. We are declaring an emergency. Do you copy?" O'Neill slipped on a headset with a built-in microphone. "Hermes, this is O'Neill. State your emergency." "Logan, this is Barbara. We just launched Hermes 2 for its descent to TRAPPIST-1D when we got hit by a massive solar EMP. The pulse knocked out 90% of our ship's computers, and we are on manual control. Only communication and life support systems are online." "What about Hermes 2? "They are not responding to our requests for updates." "Barbara, can you reboot the computer systems?" "No one is sure right now. I'm being told some of the circuits are fried and need to be replaced." "Do you have enough replacement parts?" "My chief engineer is too busy to ask at the moment." "What about propulsion control?" That's what they're working on? Our orbit was low so we could launch Hermes 2. We're getting ready to... She paused. Just a second, Logan. The three individuals in the Hermes 1 command center remained quiet. O'Neill thought he could hear his heart pounding in his chest. He looked at Paul, snapped his fingers, and whispered, "Get on the sensors and see what you can detect." With a nod, the pilot moved to another console and started making adjustments. O'Neill turned to Nina. "Check to see if the EMP affected any of our systems." TRAPPIST-1D isn't aligned with 1E right now. Sunspots are regional and electromagnetic pulses, when emitted, are normally a focused beam of high energy. We should be okay, but I'll check. Do it. The voice of the Hermes commander came back on the speaker. "Oh my God, Logan. The Hermes 2 entered the atmosphere, broke apart, and the pieces are burning up in the atmosphere." O'Neill closed his eyes and shook his head. "What about your situation? Any updates?" "Not looking good for us either." Her voice remained calm and professional. "We can't stop our orbital degradation. I'm told if we don't get our propulsion back online here in the next few minutes, we're doomed." "Not sure what to say, Barbara." "Nothing to say, look." The hiss from the speakers told O'Neill all he needed to know. Hermes had entered the planet's atmosphere and was probably breaking up. He looked at his pilot, who turned and just shook his head. "Damn." Paul said, "Skipper, in the data we received, TRAPPIST-1 was classified as a stable G-type star, similar to Sol. However, readings we are getting show it's actually an M-class. It's several billion years older than Sol and entering a phase of instability." "Wait a minute, Paul. That data indicated it was younger than Earth's sun." "Not according to what these instrument readings are telling me." The flight commander drummed his fingers on a control panel. "What the hell else is incorrect about our information on this system?" Nina looked up. "Whatever it might be, it just cost the lives of every crew member of the Hermes, Hermes 2, and probably us as well. We've got no way to get home." Dakota entered the cavern only he, as the medicine man, knew about. His predecessor and mentor introduced him to this sacred place over 40 winters ago. Since then, his need to travel to this location rarely occurred. Tonight, he felt a compelling need to consult with the Ancient Ones. Communicating with them required a simple but intricate process. Stripped down to his loincloth, he sat cross-legged in the center of the sanctuary's smooth floor. Before him stood a clear tube half the height of a grown male. He sat with his hands on his knees with his palms facing the ceiling. Closing his eyes, he recited the words his mentor told him to memorize so many years ago. The words held no meaning for him, but his instructions were to pronounce them properly and in the correct order. Alpha 5-2, Beta 9-7, Phi 12, Delta 72, Lambda 17. A glow appeared at the bottom of the tube, intensified and extended to the top as he recited the words. When he finished, a baritone voice said, "Who has spoken the code?" "It is I, Dakota, medicine man of the Nuevo Nation of Humans." "You are recognized, Dakota. Speak." "A large egg-shaped vessel has landed on our world. I grow concerned about the appearance of this object and seek guidance on how to protect my people." "Dakota, medicine man of the Nuevo Nation of Humans, think back on the teachings of your ancestors. Did they not predict this would happen?" "Yes." "Are there men like yourself inside the vessel?" "I do not know. I have not seen any." "When you see who occupies it, you will know what to do." "How?" "Think back on your lessons from your ancestors. They told you about this day. Remember their words." "But..." The glow diminished and Dakota knew the interview was over. He sat in the dark as the final words spoken to him suddenly made sense. The mood among the crew of the Hermes 1 could only be described as dire. All were professional astronauts with thousands of hours of experience. Each knew the dangers of venturing outside their home solar systems, and all accepted the risk. However, the reality of the current situation made them face the cold, sobering fact they were now stranded 40 light-years from their home planet. Carol Snow stood behind O'Neill as he studied the readouts of the demise of the Hermes mothership. "Logan, let's face it, we're stuck here." I know, Carol. Without the Hermes, we cannot communicate with the Foundation in a timely manner. With the equipment we have on board, any message we send will take 40 years to reach them. A lot can happen in 40 years. Yes, I'm aware of that. Paul Weaver climbed up through the access tube into the command center. Hey, Skipper, Jack and I have jury-rigged warning pods we can place around Hermes 1. They'd give us a heads up if something alive approached the ship. Plus, who or what will get a surprise when they try to cross the boundaries? O'Neill nodded. Thanks, Paul. How much time will they give us? Depends on how far from the ship you want to place them. What's their range? In theory, a kilometer. In reality, I wouldn't put them more than half a click from the ship. Make it so. Before you go, Paul, do we have the fuel to take off and land again? A couple of times. Why? In case we need to move our location. We'll need to be careful with our fuel use. What if the next place is worse? Good point. Okay, you and Jack go ahead and set up the early warning pods, but neither of you are to do anything solo. Always have a buddy with you on extravehicular activities. Got it, Skipper. When the pilot disappeared down the access tube, Carol turned to O'Neill. What are you not telling us about this planet, Logan? He hesitated for a few moments. The information in our database about this place isn't even close to what we've observed. Before we broke Earth orbit, I was assured the survey information about this planet would be 100% accurate. Now it appears there's probably intelligent life here. I think it's more than probable. I agree, but how do we prove it? Send up the high-altitude unmanned drones. If the place is inhabited, they should be able to tell us. That's a good idea, Carol. Can you work with Paul to get them in the air? She nodded. Then what? We slip into survival mode. If the place is inhabited, we need to determine if it is hostile to our presence. If we find they are, we need to find somewhere we can defend, settle in, and survive. 4 drones lifted off from a patch of ground north of Hermes 1. All were programmed to seek out nutrient-enriched soil and flowing water. Plus, they were equipped with ground-searching radar and ultra-red imaging to search for living organisms. Paul Weaver controlled the flights remotely from his console on the level below the command center. Each of the drones had a range of 100 kilometers and would spread out within their quadrant in a triangular flight pattern. The programmed path would return the drones to the Hermes 1 when their missions were completed. O'Neill asked, Do I need to help you monitor them, Paul? Weaver smiled and looked up at his commanding officer. Skipper, don't worry. I know what I'm doing. With a limp smile, O'Neill placed his hand on the pilot's shoulder. I know, Paul. I'm just anxious about the results. Me too. If there's anything to find, they'll find it. What if we need to move to another continent? Do we have the fuel? We would have to gain orbit and then land. We've only got the fuel to do that once. Then let's find a compatible spot close to here. How many jumps could we do? Max of 3. Beyond that, I can't promise a smooth landing. Got it. O'Neill retreated to his stateroom 2 floors below. When he got there, the room was empty. After taking his uniform off, he lay on his bunk with his hands behind his head. 15 minutes later, Carol Snow entered the room and locked the door. She wore a simple smock, which she pulled off over her head. O'Neill watched her and lifted the covers as she slipped in next to him. She snuggled and asked, Are we going to be okay, Logan? Silence filled the room as the commanding officer drew her into an embrace. The optimist in me says yes. The realist isn't sure yet. She buried her face against his chest, his arms encircling her. She said, I want the optimist to be correct. So do I. The 6 crew members gathered in the galley the next morning to listen to Renee Weaver, the mission's biologist and medical doctor, summarize the drone missions from the previous evening. If we stay where we are now, we're basically screwed. O'Neill sipped coffee. Why? The soil within 200 kilometers of our position has a high alkaline pH. So high, only certain trees, shrubs, and vines can survive. The drones found no edible vegetation within a 100-kilometer radius circle. Limestone is prominent underneath the subsoil. While we have evidence animals were here at one time, they seem to have disappeared. I don't even recommend consuming the water." O'Neill raised an eyebrow. "Surely our osmosis system will clean it?" "Preliminary analysis shows unknown single-cell organisms in abundant quantities. The process will get most of them, but it's the ones we don't get that worry me." "What about boiling the water?" "We can try, but some of the bacteria appear to be heat-resistant." "How about ultraviolet radiation?" "We're still testing and it shows promise." O'Neill did not respond as he drummed his fingers on the galley table. "So the environment where we are currently is hostile to human existence?" Renee nodded. "For our biological makeup, that's a correct assessment." Jack Brady stood to refill his coffee. "That fact wasn't mentioned in the initial survey, was it, Skipper?" "No, it wasn't. The only fact the survey was correct on was the atmosphere. Same basic composition as Earth. 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, 0.9% argon, and 0.1% other gases, such as carbon dioxide." The mission specialist sipped his freshly poured coffee. "So we need to find somewhere else on this rock to try to survive?" Nina Webb said, "Unless we abandon this planet and try another one within the system." Shaking his head, O'Neill clasped his hands and placed them on the table. "I don't trust any of the data from the original survey of this solar system. This planet was considered the best one suitable for colonization. You have to remember, we have 3 planets in our sun's habitable zone. One is Venus, which has a runaway greenhouse effect, and the other is the dust bowl of Mars. No, we have to stay on this planet. We have enough fuel to do 3 hops and that's it. I believe we need to be cautious and not waste any of our fuel until we figure out a good landing spot." Carol spoke for the first time during the meeting. "I've been running some numbers. We have enough food on board to last 6 months. If we ration, maybe 9. We don't know what the seasons are like here. Plus, we haven't seen any living multi-cell animals larger than ants so far. The skeletal remains from the teepee were very old." She paused. "I haven't seen any birds either. We need to send the drones out again to search for other life. Let's face the facts, we're going to be here a while. If we are going to survive, we need to find a place where we can start growing our own crops." Nina nodded. "I'm with Carol. The planet is tilted on its axis more severely than Earth, so seasons could be a lot more diverse and severe. Since we are on the equator, somewhere else around here might be our best bet." A vibration could be felt throughout the ship, which grew in intensity with each passing second. O'Neill muttered, "Oh, what fresh hell is this?" All 6 members of the crew, without being told, hurried to their duty station. O'Neill climbed the ladder toward the command center. Dakota stood to leave the Ancient One's cavern when the ground began to shake. He rushed toward the entrance, trying to keep his balance at the same time counting. Most of the tremors lasted to a count of 60 or 90. Dust and pebbles fell from the cave's ceiling as he grew closer to the opening. His count went to over 100 as he passed through the entrance. After hearing the sound of large rocks crashing to the floor behind, he turned to see a large boulder partially block the entrance. When his counting reached 150, the tremors stopped. Dust continued to fall from the ceiling as he looked in. A low rumble from deep within the cavern caused Dakota to stand back from the entry as a cloud of dust and debris billowed out. When quiet returned to the cave, he re-entered to retrace his steps toward the home of the Ancient Ones. When he arrived, the clear tube lay shattered on the floor. Plus, one of the room's walls had collapsed, exposing sunlight and a huge open-air expanse. He stepped into the newly revealed area and marveled at what it contained. The sight of the object suddenly brought back all the words his ancestors had told him long ago. "Bad news, Skipper." Jack Brady popped his head up through the opening into the command center without entering. O'Neill turned to look at the mission specialist, who also acted as the team's geologist. "How bad?" "The scale of that quake was off the charts compared to anything we've ever measured on Earth. From what we could determine, the epicenter was thousands of miles north. So in other words, this hellhole is also unstable. Ground radar shows the crust of the planet underneath us as porous, like a sponge. So these types of earthquakes could be common and happen on a regular basis. Aren't we lucky? Paul and I think it's imperative we find a more stable locale. There's a strong possibility a sinkhole could open under us at any moment. That bad? Brady nodded. Yeah, that bad. Okay, let's get out of here. Have Nina prepare to take off. Roger that, Skipper. O'Neill folded his arms as Nina Webb sat at the flight control modular on the command deck. He asked, "Can we obtain orbit?" "Yes, but we would only have enough fuel to land and that would be it. Where we set down will be our home for at least 40 years, probably longer." "My guess would be longer." "Mine too." She looked up at him. "Jack is concerned about the data we have on this planet." "I don't trust it either." "What happens if this is the most stable region on the planet?" "The thought has crossed my mind." "Like we've discussed, we have enough fuel to do 3 medium-length hops or make orbit once." "I know. When we first got here, I argued with the mission commander about letting us orbit for a day or so to get a feel for the place. She told me to trust the surveys and do my job." "Guess you won't get a chance to tell her she was wrong." "No." He scratched the stubble of his week-old beard. "Keep preparing the ship for takeoff. I'm calling a meeting with the others." 15 minutes later, the remaining 5 members of Hermes 1's crew gathered in the galley. O'Neill started the meeting. "I've had a short conversation with Nina. She says we have enough fuel to make orbit and then land again, hopefully in a more stable environment. The original survey of this planet indicated where we are today is the best suited to start colonization." He looked at all 5 individuals. "As we have discovered, the survey was total BS." Nods from the others. "Okay, we have a decision to make. Make orbit and take our time surveying the planet and pick a new spot. Once we do, that's it. We have to make it our home for the foreseeable future." Carol asked, "Or?" "We make up to 3 medium-length hops to various spots and see if they are more stable." Renee Weaver raised her hand. "How far is a medium hop?" "Good question. Nina told me less than 1,000 kilometers." "What if we make shorter hops? Can we make more?" Shaking his head, O'Neill said, "Doesn't work that way. Most of the fuel is used on takeoff and landing. We have enough for 3 and only 3. Renee and Paul looked at each other. He nodded, and she said, "Paul and I vote to make orbit." O'Neill looked at Jack. "What do you, Nina, say?" "Orbit." Carol put her arm around O'Neill's waist. "What do you think?" "It's up to you." "Orbit." "Then it's unanimous. We make orbit and see what's going on with this rock." The egg-shaped vessel emitted fire as it rose toward the heavens. Dakota felt a sense of satisfaction. His plan to force the object to leave would remain that, only a plan. Since it included the possible deaths of whoever traveled within the egg, he felt a sense of relief. He did not want to instruct the warriors of his tribe to take a life. Killing was never a good answer, but in self-defense of his people, he would not hesitate to make the decision. He watched it until the object disappeared into a cloudless sky. The rainy season would start soon, and it was time for everyone in his tribe to start planting. The shimmering radiances, known to him as devil lights, lit the sky as the sun set low on the western horizon. The increasing frequency of their appearance concerned him, along with the growing intensity of the earthquakes and the scarcity of game for his warriors to hunt. Maybe it was time to move his tribe, although where to remained a mystery. Hermes 1 circled the planet TRAPPIST-1e in a polar orbit for a week. While the ship circled the globe every 90 minutes, its rotation underneath them exposed a new part of the surface each time around. This allowed the crew to search the entirety of the planet for a suitable landing zone. At the end of the week, having measured and surveyed the entire planet numerous times, a dejected crew gathered in the galley for yet another briefing. "Well, now we know," Jack Brady summarized the findings. "There is a narrow strip of arable land extending 150 kilometers above and the same distance below the equator. Since most of this planet's surface in this narrow region is ocean, where we originally landed seems to be the most hospitable section of the planet." O'Neill stood off to the side of the meeting, his arms folded with one hand supporting his chin. He let the crew talk. Renee Weaver spoke next. Paul and I have been able to determine this planet, like Earth, possesses an iron core and thus a magnetosphere. Unlike Earth, it is less dense and only protects this narrow strip around the planet from solar radiation emitted by TRAPPIST-1. The loss of the Hermes and our sister ship Hermes 2 was due to an outbreak of sunspots which are causing numerous EMP bursts. We believe this particular star is entering a new stage of solar instability, and at some point in the near future, the radiation emitted by the star could overcome the weak magnetic field generated by the planet's less dense iron core. When that happens, whatever life is left will be wiped out. O'Neill spoke for the first time. So even if we find a place where we can grow crops and build shelter, it will all be for naught. Unfortunately, Skipper, that is correct. How long? Paul answered. Year, 2, maybe never. As we know, the data from the early exploration of this planetary system was completely wrong. We don't know the planet's history. The current situation may have been the norm for centuries. We just don't know. The commander pressed his lips together. Is this the only habitable planet in the system? He looked at Nina Webb. No, TRAPPIST-1D is similar, but we don't have the fuel available to break orbit, circle it, and safely re-enter the atmosphere. Puts us in a no-win situation, doesn't it? Everyone nodded. Well then, let's go around a few more times and identify a better spot for us to target as a landing zone. The point of light grew brighter by the moment as it streaked across the sky. Denali, chief warrior of the Nuevo Nation, followed its trek. His band of men stood behind him. Some watched in awe, others feared it as a bad omen. When the light vanished behind a mountain east of where they hunted, he stood silently memorizing the location. Speaking to no one in particular, he said, "The egg-shaped object has returned." The shimmering and swirling lights, having grown more intense during the egg-shaped vessel's absence, momentarily dimmed as the object streaked overhead in the sky. I must return to the village and tell Dakota what I have witnessed. Turning to his band of men, he made a whooping sound and set off toward their village at a steady pace. His warriors followed. Denali sat on the ground in Dakota's teepee. A fire burned in the center with the smoke climbing toward the opening at the top. The older man asked, "You bring word of the egg-shaped object?" "Yes, it has returned." "Where?" "Over the eastern mountains." "Can you lead a group of warriors to it?" "Yes." Remaining quiet for a few moments, he noticed Denali did not prepare to leave. Instead, he displayed a frown on his handsome face. Dakota continued, "You have concerns, my brother?" Denali nodded. "Speak." When the object flew overhead, the shimmering lights faded and then stopped. Once the light disappeared behind the mountain, only then did the swirling colors return to the sky. Dakota's brow furrowed. "And you saw this with your own eyes?" "Yes, ask my warriors. Many called it a bad omen." "The shimmering lights are growing in both brightness and intensity. Our ancestors do not foretell of this happening." "Is the appearance of the egg causing the shimmering lights, Dakota?" "Only the ancient ones can answer that question, Denali. Unfortunately, they have been silenced by the shaking earth." "What do you ask of me?" "Follow me with your warriors. We will find the egg-shaped vessel." "And when we do?" "The very existence of our people depends on our success. It must be destroyed." "As you wish." The warrior bowed. "When do we leave?" During the final moments of the Hermes 1 descent, one of the 5 thruster engines on the vehicle failed. This caused the ship to tilt and land harder than engineering specs designed it to do. The landing leg on the port side of the vehicle collapsed and caused the ship to topple onto its side. Computerized controls saved the crew from a catastrophic event by immediately taking control. However, the ship would, at some point, need to be abandoned for safety reasons. 5 of the crew survived the landing without a scratch. Unfortunately, Renee Weaver suffered a broken leg and was immobilized. She supervised the setting of her leg and the inflation of a temporary cast, which would have to be utilized until she healed. Solar panels were deployed to power the generator used to inflate the team's extravehicular inflatable habitat. With the cruise biologist supported by crutches and all stores and equipment secured, O'Neill surveyed the landing zone. Carol Snow stood next to him. He said, "Well, it could have been worse." She chuckled. "I don't see how." "Think about it for a second. We could have missed the landing zone and been on top of the mountain over there. When the ship toppled, we'd still be rolling down the side." Taking a deep breath, she hugged his arm. "I see what you mean. Lucky us." "Yes, in 40 years, when our SOS sent from orbit is finally received on Earth, they will assume we are all dead. I am sure cost-cutting measures will be enacted and a rescue mission won't even be discussed." "So, this is it?" "Yeah, this is it." Jack Brady cleared his throat. "Sorry to intrude on you two, but we have another problem." Rolling his eyes, O'Neill took a breath. "You're just full of good news lately, Jack." "Sorry, Skipper, but I found something about a half-click from here you need to see." O'Neill noticed a sidearm on the mission specialist's hip. "Why the gun?" "I found human tracks." Bending over, O'Neill examined the imprint in the soil. "Damn, it sure looks like a human foot." "There are more prints 10 meters to the east." "How many?" "I guess a party of maybe 4. That is, if they walk like we do and don't have 4 feet. Brady smiled when he said it. "Okay, let's get the early warning perimeter set up and make sure the PV toll still works. Looks like we need to be proactive." "PV toll is fine. The only damage we really suffered was to the ship itself. What about the laser rifles?" "Is everyone trained?" "Yes." "Then issue them. I don't want to be surprised by an angry group of life forms who more than likely will not understand anything we say." Brady smiled. "You know, Skipper, if you speak English slow enough, everyone understands it." Shaking his head, O'Neill said, "You've been watching way too many 20th century videos, Jack." Chuckling, the mission specialist hurried away to tend to his task, leaving O'Neill and Carol near the footprints. She looked down at them. Why does a life form on a planet 40 light years from Earth have a foot that looks identical to ours? "I don't know, Carol. Maybe we should ask Renee." Renee Weaver examined the image of the footprint. "Damn, looks identical, doesn't it?" O'Neill let the question go unanswered. "You know, Skipper, there was a theory floating around about a century ago which suggested our galaxy might have been seeded by an ancient spacefaring race of humanoids." "What kind of seeds?" "DNA, actually." "You think this proves the theory?" "I didn't say that, I just mentioned it. Until we see one of these individuals, I'm not speculating what they may look like." "This damn planet was supposed to be uninhabited." She looked up at the flight commander. "You keep saying that. Obviously, it is." "Yes, but we haven't seen evidence of any large mammals or reptiles. Evolution doesn't work that way, Renee." "Then there has to be another explanation." He folded his arms. "I'm listening." "Speculation." "If that's what you've got, talk to me." 140 years ago, the Chinese were rumored to have launched an experimental faster-than-light spaceship from the dark side of the moon. They kept it a secret, and few details were known. I personally don't buy the story, but there were some who did. Actually, they launched a lot of missions from their base on the far side. Although they were supposedly sublight and restricted to our solar system, the base was abandoned about 2 decades ago when the current hyperdrive propulsion engines were introduced. Well, there you go, Skipper. Maybe these are the descendants of that mission. If they are, Carol might be able to communicate with them. Why do you say that? She speaks Mandarin. On the 6th day of their trek, a warrior who had been sent ahead to scout appeared before them, breathless and showing burn marks on his arm. Denali asked, "Why are you hurt, Mika?" A great lightning bolt struck me. There were no clouds in the sky. The head warrior started to say something, but Dakota placed his hand on the tall man's arm. Did this bolt come from the sky or the earth, Mika? The man stared at the medicine man, his eyes wide. From the ground. Dakota nodded. Can you take us to this place? Turning, the still out-of-breath man pointed. At the top of that highland, about a half a day's walk. The medicine man remained quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, We are close, Denali. He looked up at the rise of land before him. I have been to this place before. At the top of that rise is an expansive plateau. We will find answers to our questions there. Paul Weaver hovered the PV-TOL at an altitude of 100 meters while Jack Brady scanned the land below for intruders. His methodical scans of the terrain with the binoculars suddenly stopped. Weaver noticed him concentrating on one specific area. Do you see something, Jack? Movement halfway down the slope. Want me to get closer? Yeah, take us down 50 meters. The hovering vehicle grew closer to the ground when Brady suddenly motioned for Weaver to take it back up. What is it? 14 men, dark-skinned, who look like they come from an island in the South Pacific. Are they armed? Bows and arrows are all I saw. How far from the security perimeter? Maybe half a click. Did they see us? Yeah, one of them pointed directly at the PV-TOL. Time to tell the skipper I'm heading back. Brady only nodded as he kept his concentration on the advancing men. Dakota pointed at the strange object floating over the plateau. We have been discovered. Denali turned in the direction the medicine man indicated. A sense of fear nibbled at the base of his brain when he heard gasps from some of the men behind him. One cried out, The Great Spirit will protect us, won't it? Yes, my brothers. We also have our medicine man with us. He too will protect us. Dakota kept his concentration on the object as it flew north, away from where he stood. He turned to Denali. I am not sure the Great Spirit can protect us against men powerful enough to fly. Denali stared at his older companion. I saw no men, just a large machine. The front part of the object was transparent. I saw two men, similar in appearance to us. He stood still and continued to gaze at the top of the plateau. Denali, make sure your warriors have fresh water and something to eat. I will explore and try to determine who these men are. No, Dakota. I will go instead. With a smile, the older man shook his head. It will be all right. Protect your men. I must know more about this flying machine before I place any of you in harm's way. After climbing to the top of the rise, Dakota noticed a shiny pole with a green light blinking on the top. He stopped several meters away and studied it. Picking up a rock, he tossed it toward the pole. With a crackling sound, the rock stopped even with the pole and fell to the ground. That's what caused Mika's burn. He looked further and saw another pole. Staying outside what he considered an invisible fence, Dakota started walking again toward what he knew lay beyond. The events of the past few days caused him to remember a warning heard from the Ancient Ones many years ago. They foretold that their ancestors would find them one day. O'Neill watched the older man approach the outside of the security fence. He walked with his hands at his side, his left hand using a large walking stick. His clothing appeared to be made of a woven material and draped over his slender frame. His hair was long on the sides and pulled into a ponytail in the back. His facial features reminded the flight commander of someone from the Pacific Rim on Earth. He stopped and raised his right hand. He spoke, but O'Neill did not understand. Carol said, I think he said he is not a threat. Mandarin? A mangled version of it. So the rumor may be true. This could be what's left of the Chinese experimental spaceship. Can you ask him his name? I'll try, but I might be asking for a soup recipe. She said something and waited for the man's response. Dakota. O'Neill heard multiple swishing sounds high overhead above the protection of the security fence. He reacted by protecting Carol with his body and looking back toward his crew. he noticed their weapons pointed toward his right and firing just as arrows struck their targets. Jack Brady and Paul Weaver stiffened as arrows embedded in their chests. Both men grimaced but remained standing. They trained their weapons on targets to O'Neill's right and continued to fire. Nina Webb collapsed with an arrow through her upper torso. O'Neill withdrew his weapon as he looked in the direction of his team's fire. At least 12 warriors, similar in appearance to Dakota, collapsed, all suffering from massive damage from the weapons burning huge holes in their torsos. Moving his handgun toward the old man, he saw horror in his expression as he watched his warriors collapse and die from the laser fire. A tall man, his right arm missing, started running toward O'Neill screaming. He ran into the security barrier and burst into flames. The carnage subsided and the flight commander aimed his weapon at the old man just outside the electronic fence. The only survivor now displayed a mask of grief. O'Neill said to Carol, "Ask him why they attacked." She spoke and saw the old man return his gaze toward them. He emitted sounds. The length of time between his words and Carol's translation seemed like an eternity. "They were following my orders. Forgive me. I only now understand who you are." O'Neill turned to check on his crew. Jack and Paul were now prone on the ground. He felt the carotid artery of each and then closed his eyes when he felt Nina's. "They're all dead." He pointed his handgun at the old man again. "Ask him why I should not kill him where he stands." Carol mumbled a few words and the old man nodded. He spoke and Carol translated. "You have every right to do so, but I can show you to a ship that will take you home." 4 months later. The ancient ship, found in a hangar carved out of rock on a mountain, took a month for O'Neill and Carol to prepare for takeoff. Now, after 12 weeks of acceleration, it approached what many physicists claimed was an unbreakable wall. Carol looked up from the flight controls of the Chinese spaceship and said to O'Neill, "It appears we will reach the speed of light and then accelerate beyond, once we're through the barrier." That is what the AI program Dakota called the Ancient One explained. He turned to Renee Weaver. "How long will it take to get back to Earth once we cross the barrier?" "The passage of time will slow for us as we reach and exceed the speed of light. Once we cross the light speed barrier, it will seem more like 3 or 4 months from our perspective. On Earth, time will pass normally. I'm guessing we will get home a few years before our SOS message reaches them." O'Neill took a deep breath. "I'm sorry Paul is not with us." "Yes, so am I." Carol said, "Dakota told me he knew the planet was dying. The Ancient Ones told him his ancestors would someday find his tribe, reveal the truth, and take them home. Apparently, he was also told about this ship, but didn't know its location until a recent earthquake. I'm glad we were able to rescue the remaining survivors of his tribe." She turned to her husband. "Why did Dakota remain behind?" "I don't know. You were the last one to speak to him." "What he said didn't make sense." "What was it?" "All of life is dreamwalking. All of death is going home." O'Neill nodded. "It's an ancient Chinese proverb, one I heard numerous times before we left on Hermes. His mission was over. He saved his people. Now, he could rest."
Chilling tales for dark nights. Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
The company assigned him to the Riverside Mall, and at first the idea excited Thomas. He hadn't been to that mall since he was a kid. The storefronts, bright and filled with the lights, lit up his memories. The mall's layout nearly unfolded itself in his mind, from the Silver Coin Arcade and the Sal's Pizza to Canale's department store that hid behind the two-story carousel and its obnoxiously cheery music. Thomas could still hum the tune with ease. Once he remembered he and his grandmother tried to catch the last feature of some cartoon at the movie theater, but they never made it. Instead, they walked the entire length of the mall in defeat, his grandmother breaking the silence with apologies, but Thomas hadn't said anything because he'd needed no apology. The empty mall was better than any movie. The main corridor, with its high ceilings and avant-garde sculptures of doves floating among spheres of tin, was for them alone. The storefronts were dark, obscured by their gates, and hid their inventories in shadow. Even the carousel was off. The horses, their white teeth and tails touched dulled, were lifeless without the multicolored lights and happy song. Thomas had imagined breaking away from his grandmother and running with all his speed through the empty mall. He enjoyed those images as he exited the highway to downtown Puentes. But what greeted him was not the same joyous building of his memories. Riverside Mall now looked like a blockish beast drudged up out of the river that lazily moved behind it. The sign was rusted, some of the bulbs blackened by neglect. The parking lot was more pothole than asphalt, and within the ruts were nests of cigarette butts and the occasional syringe. The service entrance Thomas was used to was beside the main doors. Its glass was marred by carved names and gang signs. Thomas found the door locked and rang the bell inside. The day man, Reuben, took a minute before he inched his way to the door and looked out its steel mesh window. He recognized Thomas by his photocopied ID from the company and unlocked the door. The service corridor they walked was drab, the smell of cardboard and cheap disinfectant hanging inside it. The narrow hall was dotted by steel doors for the shops to get their deliveries. The security room was tucked away in its center. Even before entering the little room walled with monitors, Thomas was uneasy. The isolation, the decay, he thought, in the right context, were frightening and strange. The dark had that power, he knew. So did the lonely hours he'd work. Yet what tied all the strangeness together was the old woman waiting for him and Reuben. Mrs. Maria V. Crawford owned the mall. She was a plump woman, short in stature, but gave off no air of frailty. Her black eyes were deep, their stare weighty. When she spoke, her voice was surprisingly buoyant and youthful.
"You were informed of the standard duties, yes?"
she asked. "Not really," Thomas said.
"The agency told you nothing?"
"No," he told her. "They just gave me the assignment and told me to show up."
"That is unfortunate,"
she said.
"Have you done this work long, Mr. Players?"
"It'll be one night when I clock out tomorrow," Thomas joked.
"So, Mr. Players, what exactly is your experience?"
"Truth be told, this is my first week out of training," Thomas admitted. "I had some career changes." This, too, seemed to vex Mrs. Crawford. She lifted her hand to silence him.
"No matter,"
she said finally.
"This job does not require much skill. For an hour you will sit in this room and watch these monitors. If anything odd occurs, call the authorities. If nothing, once that hour is up, you will walk the building. If again you see nothing, return and repeat the process."
"Have you had a lot of break-ins?"
"No.
she answered, offering no more explanation than that.
As you no doubt noticed, this place is past its prime. More than likely, any thief would target the pawn shop down the road. No, I'm more interested in not incurring additional costs, other than your employment, of course."
"Yeah, with this economy," Thomas started to say.
"The economy has little to do with it,"
Crawford corrected.
Simply put, the city has grown outward and the area is no longer fashionable. Now, even the lowliest of anchor stores wants nothing to do with the mall that's on the outs, to borrow a creditor's phrase. One day, I suppose, if I were so inclined, I could sell the land and get a hefty profit. But that brings me to the most important part of our meeting. My son, Leonard.
Mrs. Crawford said. The way she spoke his name seemed to drive the air from the room. Does he work here too? Thomas asked. The question made the silent Reuben fidget. Mrs. Crawford glared at him.
My son is unable to work. So much of what was canon in my youth is now barbarity and madness. There were complications with Leonard. A prenatal supplement. Metformin, it was called. That's what made him different. You see, my son is unique. Shy. He was born healthy, strong, but his mind never truly developed.
Thomas smoothed his hair. I'm sorry to hear that. Reuben groaned.
Apologies are for tragedies, Mr. Players.
She shot back.
My son is a miracle. A misunderstood miracle.
She continued.
Children with his condition usually die in the womb. But not my Leonard. Not my sweet, curious boy. It was people, with their ignorance and mockery, that drove him into this state and forced my hand. Leonard tried the world and was left wanting. So I opted for this new arrangement instead. See, he always loved this place, so I let him wander around at night when no one is here. He likes to look into the shops, play in the arcade, and even ride the carousel. The boy can work it by himself.
Okay, I'll introduce myself and...
You most certainly will not meet my son,
Mrs. Crawford said.
People looking at him, that triggers the old feelings. People made him uncomfortable and still do. I've informed him that you will be here during his playtime and to ignore you. So if you hear the carousel or see the arcade gate open, it is Leonard, and thus no cause for alarm. But I cannot stress it enough. Don't speak to him. Don't gesture to him. And above all, do not look at him.
Did the last guy do that?
My lawyers have informed me to say nothing of Mr. Arredondo's accident,
Crawford said, struggling to rise. Carlos moved to help her, but one stare sent him back to the wall. Standing finally, Mrs. Crawford told him,
In spite of all I've told you, this should prove to be a very mundane job. 1 hour here, 1 hour of rounds. Repeat until Reuben opens in the morning.
Yes, ma'am,
Good.
she said, waddling to the door.
If there is an incident with a thief, you can explain it to a police officer.
She said.
Leonard, on the other hand, if he were to catch someone... The bathroom is next to the food court, and all the vending machines work.
I didn't bring any change, Thomas said, patting his clothes. Mrs. Crawford grinned almost imperceptibly.
That's a pity,
she said, and left. Reuben opened the door for her and hurried down the corridor to open the rest. Thomas stood in the guard station and tried to adjust to the vast and empty solitude. The walls of monitors served as a reminder that Riverside Mall was once the third longest in Texas. One screen showed the carousel at an odd angle, and Thomas remembered that he wasn't alone. In that giant building, It was just him and Leonard. Thomas dreaded that first night. The thought of making the rounds in the dark with a socially inept recluse tensed his shoulders and tightened his jaw. The monitors didn't help. Their lack of color and sound mixed with the shadows of the storefronts and kiosks made everything look sinister, and all of their angles were off-center. Thomas thought it was a way of letting Leonard move around without being seen. That realization made his anticipation worse. At the top of the hour, Thomas took a series of deep breaths and walked into the main corridor of Riverside Mall. It was a shock to see the state of a cherished childhood memory. What was left were the scraps of commerce. The benches were square slabs of reclaimed planks painted a sticky blue, and the rectangular pots for mid-mall plants were filled with cancerous fiddle leaf and cigarette butts mixed with the stale dirt. Some of the gated storefronts, Thomas realized, had been closed long before he ever got there, their innards vacant except for the shells of countertops and the bones of display racks. Empty places with signs from a dying era, copies of a copy of a copy, until there was nothing left but their distorted remains. One such place was J&B Toys. Its sign was a smiling train, and from its smokestack puffed the store's name in a font popular 20 years ago. From what he saw, the toys, teddy bears left to die in piles, and a wall of discolored heroes with misspelled names, were either entirely generic or plain knockoffs. Thomas used his flashlight to see a stack of off-putting baby dolls in the back of the store. Even from that distance, Thomas felt the itch of their cheap fabric. Another, which replaced a long-gone Zoinks, was a sporting goods store where for all the time Thomas stared into it, he couldn't find the brand name on any of the equipment. It depressed him to see Riverside in such a state. His boots scrunched on the broken tiles, and he dodged more than one construction area. Open holes in the floor taped off with cheap plastic ribbons and anchored by trash cans. But as he neared the eastern wing, a faded sign brought a smile to his face. The Silver Coin Arcade. All the old memories of pumping quarters into the Kothdar the Barbarian cabinet, or firing off round after round in Classroom of the Dead, these made him nearly run to it. Though Thomas knew what kind of place the Riverside Mall was now, he hoped somehow, by some miracle, the arcade had been spared by time. The smell of its carpets and walls dashed his hopes away. A stale stink of mold and cigarette smoke left to moisten in the humid air wafted through the lowered cage door. Some of the games were still inside, the few remaining game cabinets discolored and chipped, but they had been replaced mostly with slot machines and video poker. Thomas lingered, hoping to glimpse any game of his youth, but was disappointed again. He turned away, and knowing no one would care, lit a cigarette. The smoke couldn't make Riverside Mall any worse with its coin-operated rocket ships half destroyed and its lone restaurant, pizza and beer, stinking of congealed grease and farts. He didn't see or hear Leonard that first night. Riverside seemingly only vague shadows as though wanting Thomas to mourn what had once been. Still, he kept his mind sharp, ready to stop at any strange echo or whispered word. Yet, it wasn't until the fourth night that Thomas had any real evidence that Leonard really existed. On the 6th hour of his shift, Thomas stood at the front window of Babette's, which, from the merchandise, catered to the slutty but economical grandmothers of the area. After lighting a cigarette, he noticed one of the potted plants had been dug up. The soil and cigarette butts were scattered on the floor, and they'd been arranged in an almost childlike way. Simple shapes, the sun and moon. Further down the main corridor, dirty handprints smeared the walls and smudged the display window of a jewelry store. Their cubic zirconia and glass pieces glistened like distant stars. Further still, One of the store's gates had been lifted enough for someone to squeeze through. In the heavy silence, hangers clacked on their racks and heavy feet slapped on the tile in the dark. Something in the dark laughed, throaty and buffoonish. Thomas froze. It wasn't the jubilant laughter of a thief collecting loot, but of a child overjoyed to have found some shiny bauble that might entertain them. Yet there was a raw power to the sound, a strength in its childish unpredictability. Careful not to make noise himself, Thomas backed away slow. As Mrs. Crawford had told him, all he had to do was make the rounds and leave Leonard alone. If it was a thief, he'd find out about it the next pass. If Crawford got mad, he'd say all he did was follow her instructions. Back in the surveillance room, Thomas watched the monitors diligently. Even the hint of movement sent him face to face with one of the greasy monitors. But the angles were frugal with their secrets. He didn't see or hear Leonard again that night, though now his rounds were exercises in dread, each step a false herald to Leonard's idiotic and powerful laugh. Leonard followed him 2 nights later. Thomas had patrolled from the center of the mall to the carousel. The fat carousel, painted to resemble a circus tent, was as savage as the rest of the mall. The horses were tattooed, the brass torn off their saddles and hooves, their noses rubbed free of paint. The old scenes painted on the inner walls were hidden in tiger scrawl. Thomas thought he had heard something, a scrape against the metal of the 2-story carousel, but paid it no attention. The carousel was old and abused, decaying a little each day until all that would be left were wooden carcasses flecked in paint. Thomas had made a ritual of his patrols. Since no one had said anything about his smoking, Thomas lit a cigarette at either end of the mall and enjoyed it on the way back to the surveillance room. That night, Thomas stopped inside of one of the entrances. The light pollution seeped into the hall like a limp tongue. Outside, his car sat alone in the parking lot, and the river flowed on. He smoked his cigarette slowly, watching the glow of the moon surf on the river. When the cherry singed the filter, Thomas stubbed the cigarette out on his heel. As he did, a shape receded behind one of the rectangular pots behind him. From the little Thomas saw of the shape, it had the dimensions of a person. Thomas didn't look back, knowing it was Leonard. Any junkie thief would have clubbed him to sleep already. Instead, Thomas continued his rounds and kept his strides even and calm. But if Leonard saw Thomas's face, he'd know, even in his condition, that Thomas was terrified. Now all Thomas heard between his steps were the soft pads of bare feet hurrying from shadow to shadow. Some creature that had been put into hiding, isolated from all the world. In rehab, Thomas learned that sometimes solitude helped ease a troubled mind, yet in others, it further degraded them. Thomas tried to put a positive light on Leonard's curiosity. He thought perhaps Leonard was like a puppy sniffing behind the new visitor. The thought made breathing easier, until Thomas remembered that even if Leonard followed him out of curiosity, Leonard was still very much human, and as such, had a natural proclivity toward the deviant, like himself. Maybe, he thought, Leonard followed to see if Thomas touched a favored plaything or otherwise disobeyed some unspoken rule of the house. Poor Thomas panicked. Leonard's state of mind might be toward the violent, toward ideas that would have Thomas pinned face first on the floor with an idiot's fist breaking his bones, and all the screaming would make Leonard pound harder and harder until Thomas needed to go to San Antonio or Houston for experimental surgeries for repair. His imagination threatened to drown him. It made Thomas's entire being endure the primal struggle between survival and reason. Every cell wanted to run at the grunts formed out of Leonard's mouth. wanted to jump at every treble-filled breath. He told himself to walk slowly, calmly. Leonard, by all accounts, was like a pet tiger. Like all captive animals grown accustomed to people, Leonard was calm but unpredictable and dangerous. Thomas reacted to the service hall door same as seeing God. Still, even when the door was closed behind him, Thomas didn't sprint for the surveillance room. If Leonard was a wild beast man, even the sound of retreat might trigger a rampage. So Thomas made his way to the room slow and opened the door as if he were bored. Though he kept his ear trained for it, the service door never opened. Thomas locked the door and didn't leave until Reuben relieved him the next day. Leonard was bolder the next few nights. He never stood in plain sight, but was louder and sloppier in his trailing. The full weight and strength of his limbs were present in the sounds of his observations. Throughout, Thomas kept his pace and his hand on the company nightstick, though he knew it would do him little good. Every scenario of Leonard's attack ended with Thomas's death, usually a horrible one. During one night, lighting a cigarette, Thomas caught a glimpse of Leonard in the reflection of a mirrored column. For the nights afterward, Thomas held his nightstick so tight he had to ice his hand at home. It wasn't his own morbid imagination now. He understood. He knew Leonard's dimensions. Mrs. Crawford said he was special, shy. Thomas had thought it was due to a stunted mental age, but the deformities hadn't stopped with Leonard's mind. They seeped into his limbs. After seeing him, Thomas understood why the cameras were at such odd angles. The bulbous skull and crooked maw. One arm raised, pressed to his chest as if injured, and the other was twisted but strong. All of his visible skin was patchy and gray, and Leonard moved like an ape, the large arm leading and the deformed legs slipping behind. But as crippled as Leonard seemed, Thomas knew the truth. Leonard was a threat. The man, isolated from society and its concepts of boundaries save the most primal, could do all types of things to Thomas against his will. Through it all, Leonard stayed away, never venturing close enough to touch or be seen, yet he was always there. At the end of one shift, Thomas asked Reuben about Leonard.
Just don't look at him,
Reuben said, shrugging.
He won't do anything.
And he's running around all night following me, Thomas went on. He's followed me.
I used to have your job,
Reuben said.
Leonard is ugly but harmless. Just leave him alone. If he follows you, it's because he's curious.
About what?
He's like a dog,
Reuben answered.
He just wants to know who you are. In time, he'll get bored and leave you alone.
Thomas nodded and went home to soak his cramped hand in ice water. Carlos had been right. After a week, Leonard didn't hound Thomas on his bi-hourly patrol. It seemed Leonard found him as boring as all the other security guards and went back to terrorizing the mall in his own harmless way. Leonard squirmed his way into the toy store one night and overturned a bin of teddy bears. Thomas heard his brutish laugh throughout his entire patrol. On another, Leonard managed to turn on one of the games in the Silver Coin Arcade. Thomas walked to the brief tunes of 32-bit glory cut short by sounds of loss and Leonard's frustration. But most nights, Leonard just played on the carousel. Thomas never saw it, even in the surveillance room. The cameras only caught the light-edged rim of the carousel. But Thomas heard it. The cheap circus music scratching through worn-out speakers, the squeak of gears, and Leonard's laughter. Full of sound and fury as his joy was, Thomas couldn't help but hear a twinge of innocence in it. Perhaps it was Leonard's glee that Thomas felt somehow matched his own when he had ridden that carousel as a boy. Or maybe it was how Reuben had explained it. Leonard was basically a puppy, not inherently good nor evil, just a creature of reactions. Prone to fits of overpowering emotion, there was a bestial quality of Leonard's intelligence, but no malice in it. More and more, Thomas pitied Leonard Crawford, the harmless but forever shunned. Ugly but kind, drawn to the meeting places of the public, but only when they were gone, leaving nothing but the ghosts of their scents. Thomas thought the world was cruel then. Leonard was a perfectly fine creature confined to the decaying Riverside Mall for nothing more than the comfort of the masses. If only they heard him laugh, Thomas thought. At first, as it was with him, the sound would be frightening. The sheer palpability of it was seldom heard in daylight. But if they could only listen, Thomas knew they'd feel its warmth and innocent joy. It was infectious. Not that he ever dared join in. In fact, Leonard hid whenever Thomas got within 50 yards of him. But Thomas listened and grew to admire it. Soon his admiration turned to envy. Thomas used to laugh like that. Used to look at the world like it was built on magic and miracles. Life stole that from him, though Thomas couldn't remember exactly how. Ex-girlfriends took some of it with them, a few by force. School took another along with a sizable chunk of his wages still. Work stole the rest, grinding away the days, gnawing until the weeks slid by with nothing to show for it but more bills and neck pain from a shitty mattress Thomas couldn't afford to replace. Thomas had tried to find that magic again with booze and smoke, but they had only left him twice as empty and twice as broke. But not Leonard. Leonard had learned enough of the world to hide from it, memories of scorn still fresh in his simple mind. Leonard's life was frolicking through the garbage of visitors like they were relics of his home world. Still, Leonard laughed with his entire being, all over a carousel he had ridden for years. In the surveillance room and on the way home, Thomas tried to recall a time he was ever happy enough to laugh like that. The fact that he couldn't stung him for days. Thomas got it into his head that seeing Leonard play on the carousel would somehow transfer some of that childish joy into him. Enamored with the idea as Thomas was, he still knew Leonard was dangerous. But all he needed was a glimpse, a quick look at Leonard's happy face. To do so, though, Thomas knew he'd have to be quiet. It took days of deliberation to convince himself to do it. A part of him said this was Leonard's private matter, but the thought was demolished by Thomas's selfishness. He, the world, needed the unbridled positivity hidden away at the Riverside Mall. All Thomas had to do was witness it and accept it like a virus. The world would be a better place if he took that look at Leonard in his moments of pure joy. For a week, Thomas only left the surveillance room when the cheap circus music came on. Even then, he walked only close enough to see the lights play across the storefronts. He got close, but never too close. On one night, though, it played like a siren song, and Thomas decided he'd finally look. Thomas removed his boots, feeling the gritty through his socks, and stepped a few times to test the silence. Next, he lit a cigarette and puffed at it until the cherry was bright and strong. Thomas left it burning on one of the potted plants. He thought that if Leonard was like an animal, the smoke smell might deceive Leonard enough for Thomas to get close. In the distance, the carousel echoed. Leonard's laugh was its offbeat percussion. As Thomas got closer, the carousel revealed itself by centimeters, mere glimpses of the colored bulbs at first. Then the edges, and eventually the faces of horses. Defiled as they were, they kept a steady pace, the gears all greased and in working order. It took Thomas a moment to spot Leonard. Thomas thought he'd find him at the bottom, his disfigurement not allowing any seats beyond those. But Leonard was resourceful, and Thomas saw him on the second story in a two-seater shaped like a carriage, pulled by a thick-necked Clydesdale. Leonard raised his misshapen arm as though holding a set of invisible reins, snapping the imaginary leather to urge on his steed through some childish adventure plan in Leonard's head. All this brought forth that laugh Thomas wanted. Thomas stepped closer and stared at Leonard's face. His eyes were semi-closed and mouth gaped open like a wound. His joy revealed yellow, twisted teeth. Yet Thomas saw through the asymmetry of Leonard's features. He saw no skin color splashed over Leonard's cheeks, paid no mind to the disproportioned skull. All he saw was joy, pure as the universe, refined. It was a thing no amount of money or drugs could replicate. The carousel's revolution hid Leonard from sight, and Thomas was filled with what he was convinced was the grace of charity. In flashes, he went over the next few months with Leonard, the gaining of trust and the start of their friendship, all because Leonard saw that Thomas wouldn't look away and didn't treat him cruelly. Thomas could teach Leonard to speak, he imagined, and Thomas would, after many discussions, reveal to Leonard that it was the simple joy he displayed on the carousel that inspired Thomas to be a better person. These dreams filled Thomas with a sleepy warmth, a sense he had found a path to be proud of, one that would lead him to the heights of human experience. When Leonard came around again, he stared at Thomas.
"It's okay,"
Thomas said, patting the air.
"I'm not here to hurt you. I want to be friends."
Leonard was uncertain of what to do next, but after a few moments, he shuffled to the edge of the carousel and sniffed the air as if to test it. Leonard revolved closer and Thomas got a clearer view of the extent of Leonard's deformities. The goiters and swellings, the patches of hair and scaly skin.
"It's okay,"
Thomas called, the carousel turning so Leonard was hidden again among the rods and wooden steeds.
"I just want to be friends."
When Leonard returned, a distortion had overcome his frame, settling most startlingly in his eyes. There was no childlike innocence to them. Yellow and sickly, they had more tiger than lamb. Thomas stood in their predatory focus and knew another pure experience as old as life. Fear. The fear mice have of hawks. The fear of lost calves at the howls in the night. There was no humanity in Leonard's eyes, only an aggression so complex that Leonard's mind couldn't articulate it in anything but the hunched pose of a wild animal ready to pounce. Like his laughter, Leonard's roar was hypnotic. Thomas didn't react to Leonard climbing down his carousel and jettisoning toward him like a wounded ape. Only when Leonard was a few feet away, teeth bared and voice quaking, did Thomas turn to run. But his sock slid on the tile and he landed on his knees. Like a sugar-coated infant, Thomas crawled away as fast as he could. Though nearly sprinting on all fours, Thomas knew it was useless. Leonard would tear him limb from limb. But the animal part of Thomas's brain strobed horrid scenarios at him, spurning him to be away, away, away. Something heavy landed on his back, flattening Thomas out and blasting the air from his lungs. His brain tried to summon all his strength and more. Only Thomas's arms responded, flailing fruitlessly, because his legs had ceased to work. A big, grotesque paw clamped onto the back of Thomas's skull and pressed his forehead into the towel. Screaming, Thomas felt the cheap towel crunch under his forehead and felt Leonard's weight on his neck. Behind his eyes, a pressure built until Thomas couldn't shut them against their swelling and forceful evacuation. Blind, Thomas was consumed by the monstrous pressure. Yet through it all, Leonard laughed. hearty and strong, and the carousel played its scratchy song.
Chilling tales for dark nights. Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
The following program is a production of Chilling Entertainment and the creative team at Chilling Tales for Dark Nights, and a proud member of the Simply Scary Podcast Network. Visit simplyscarypodcast.com to learn more about this and our other weekly storytelling programs, and become a patron today to show your support and get instant access to our extensive archive of downloadable tales of terror. Thank you for listening, and enjoy the show. Disclaimer: Horror Hill is a horror anthology podcast bringing you scary stories from all corners of the internet and beyond. As such, certain stories include content that some listeners might find offensive. Listener discretion is advised. Good evening, listeners. Welcome back to Horror Hill. I'm your host, Eric Peabody, and tonight we're concluding J.G. Martin's space epic, His Crooked Gospel, which we began last week. If you haven't yet listened to that episode, I recommend starting there first. But for the rest of you, here's a quick recap. Our narrator is Isaiah Mitchell, an agent with a secret government agency investigating the crash of a giant UFO in the New Mexico wilderness. But this isn't the first time that Isaiah has met these extraterrestrials. For years, he's had nightmares of being abducted as a boy, and now is starting to suspect that these dreams were in fact repressed memories. As a child, racing on his bike through the woods to get to the hospital and see his dying sister, Isaiah was taken on board an alien craft. There, he met two Vitarians, advanced reptilian creatures that informed him that he would be melted down and replaced by a clone as part of a plan to counteract a being of great power and malevolence. With some quick bargaining, Isaiah convinces the aliens to at least tell him why this needed to be done, and they begin to recount a sprawling tale that spans centuries. The Vitarian civilization had become infected with a virus that struck their race immortal yet infertile. They found solace in a new religion called the Way of the Chosen, and all non-believers were exiled. One of those exiles, known only as the Heretic, seeded life on our Earth, and after seeing the potential that the human race demonstrated, created an ultimate being known as the Runaway, human in form, but possessed of the ability to adapt and evolve to any adversity and with lightning speed. At the end of last week's episode, the Runaway had finally found and confronted the Heretic. Tonight, we learn the fate of Isaiah, the Runaway, and the entirety of the cosmos. You're listening to the free edition of this program. If you'd like to help support Horror Hill and also remove these pesky ads, head to chillingtalesfordarknights.com and click Patrons in the upper menu to sign up today. You'll get instant access to hundreds of ad-free stories, so what are you waiting for? Also, if you're watching on YouTube, do us a favor and drop a like and subscribe. Become part of our Dark Circle, listeners. And now, from author J.G. Martin, I give you His Crooked Gospel, Part 2. The Recall. Images riot past me, a torrential downpour of cosmic memory. I'm falling again, spiraling out of my body and mind, plummeting into the collective history of the Vitarian species. Millennia flash by in heartbeats. Epochs become blurs. My very consciousness strains under the weight of it all, like a white-hot sphere of mental energy growing redder with each new detail, each fresh revelation. And then it cools. The maelstrom of history coalesces, focusing like a lens zeroing in on a singular moment. Once again, I'm observing the spacecraft orbiting Saturn's rings, a fragile bubble of life amidst the vast, indifferent starscape. Within it, the heretic and runaway stand frozen in time, their words poised to rewrite the very nature of existence. "They've come from my world before," the runaway murmurs, his eyes flickering as he sifts through the heretic's memories. "I see it now. The great lizards, wiped from existence. Their strike was cataclysmic, bringing the planet to its knees, making molten gold scream from its wounds. If they return..." "Yes," the heretic confirms, his clawed hand pressed against the observation window. In the inky void beyond, a green speck, Earth, floats, magnified by digital overlay. "Should they come again, they will ensure nothing remains but cosmic dust. Your very existence terrifies them, for you are beyond their comprehension." The runaway's brow furrows. "What if I could make them understand? If I were to journey to the realm of the chosen, to prove I'm not some instrument of destruction, would they forgive you then? Would they spare my world?" The heretic's pupils contract to beads, a display of grim concern. "I fear not. A millennium of peace couldn't sway them to trust you. It goes against their very nature. In their eyes, you will forever remain a false god." "False god," the runaway echoes, the words alien on his tongue. "Yes, a pretender." The runaway's eyes narrow, a spark igniting within them. "If I am a false god, then what is a true one?" The heretic taps a finger against his temple. "It would be simpler for you to see for yourself." The runaway's expression hardens, his jaw set with determination. The heretic feels a cool whisper as his son's consciousness slips into his mind. The runaway's eyes become slits, his lips pressing into a thin line as he delves deeper and deeper into the vast ocean of the heretic's knowledge. Suddenly, he recoils, sucking in a sharp breath. "Him," the runaway gasps, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and terror. The heretic kneels, placing a comforting claw on his son's trembling leg. "Yes, the distant one. He is the deity of the chosen, the purported omnipotence that exists just beyond the reaches of the universe." "In the edge," the runaway whispers, his voice quivering with a cocktail of fear and excitement. He turns to the heretic, his eyes alight with a feverish curiosity. "Have you ever visited this place? The Edge?" "Never," the heretic says, shaking his head. "It is a realm beyond reach. Countless Vitarians have embarked on pilgrimages, but none have returned. If the universe can be called hostile to life, then the Edge, it harbors an active, implacable malevolence toward it. All who seek it are consumed." The runaway falls silent, his gaze drifting back to the star-speckled void. Even his unfathomable mind seems to struggle with the weight of these revelations. Moments stretch into minutes, minutes into hours. The heretic attempts to speak, sensing a shift in his son, but the runaway remains unresponsive, motionless, his eyes unblinking. At last, the runaway's lips part, his voice barely a whisper. I should have realized long ago that these humans were not like me, and nor, for that matter, are you. A tear escapes the corner of his eye, followed by another and another, until they cascade down his cheeks in a quiet river. The heretic, recognizing this display of human sorrow, moves to comfort his son, but the runaway shrinks from his touch. I was born of humans, the runaway says, his words fracturing under the weight of his grief. I was shaped by them. Their genetic influence torments me, driving me toward this inescapable need for companionship and connection. But these humans, they offer nothing to sate this hunger. Their experiences are too limited to grant me wisdom, their perspectives too narrow to afford me knowledge. My mind expands with each passing moment, my capabilities growing beyond measure. I sit before you, evolving still, and yet... His voice breaks. I would throw it all away to be like them. He turns, locking eyes with the heretic. Why? He pleads. Why did you make me this way, Father? The heretic's voice is brittle, shattered by the suffering in his child's words. I am sorry, he says, the words feeling wholly inadequate. I never meant to burden you with such an existence. If it were in my power, I would take away your pain in an instant. The runaway turns away, his knuckles cracking as his hands clench into fists. He raises an arm, wiping away the tears with a swift, angry motion. Perhaps, he says, his voice low and determined. You already have, Father. My child, the heretic asks, confusion in his tone. I don't understand your meaning. Connection, the runaway explains, rising to his feet. He leans his forehead against the cold surface of the observation window, staring out into the abyss. His dark hair falls across his hollow eyes. I will find it, Father. Someone like me, someone who truly understands what it means to exist without limitations, to stand above all other forms of life, unburdened by ignorance. An uneven smile slips across his lips. I will find God. 12 October, 1991. My consciousness crashes back into me like an asteroid impact. Every nerve ignites, electricity coursing through my limbs in violent spasms, as something powerful holds me down. War. My vision swims into focus, and I see him looming above me, gripping my shoulders. His eyes are wide with a mixture of concern and fascination. Behind him, Kaz hovers anxiously. Both of their pupils are pulsing like strobe lights. You saw? They ask in perfect unison, their voices thrumming with urgency. I take a breath, my muscles relaxing and mind slowing as the effects of the collective recall leave my psyche. More than before, I croak. The runaway, he went in search of God, or the distant one, is that right? War nods solemnly. Yes, the runaway sought out the distant one in the edge. I apologize for the abrupt extraction. Your biometrics indicated extreme stress. How do you feel, human? Fuzzy, I mutter, blinking away the last vestiges of disorientation. But I'm okay, I think. I look up at the Vitar pair, suddenly aware of the tension crackling between them. Is everything all right? They exchange loaded glances. Kaz huffs, a sound like grinding boulders, before stalking back to his console. His clawed feet click ominously against the metal deck. War's eyes, by contrast, are wide with barely contained excitement. "We extracted significant data during your recall," War explains, practically vibrating with enthusiasm. "This could prove invaluable to our mission, exponentially increasing humanity's chances of survival." That's incredible," I exclaim, a spark of hope igniting in me. "So, does this mean you're scrapping the whole turning me into human soup thing?" "Oh, no," War says gleefully. "Your genetic material has become even more valuable. By combining it with the neurological data harvested during your recall, we can dramatically accelerate the development of our countermeasure." The spark of hope in me gutters and dies. Maybe it's the lingering effects of the sedative, or perhaps I've simply reached my limit for cosmic disappointments. But something inside me snaps, and I round on War, my voice trembling with barely contained fury. "So that's it? I get this close to understanding the biggest asshole in the universe, and instead of answers, you're just going to liquefy me? That's my reward." "Human," War begins, but I cut him off, my emotions boiling over. "No, you listen. I've been nothing but cooperative. If what you're saying is true, if my data has actually helped turbocharge humanity's salvation or whatever, then don't I at least deserve to see how the runaway story ends? Don't I deserve to see what I'm throwing away my life for?" "Listen, human," Kaz thunders, startling me. I turn to find him fixing me with an intense stare. "You will enter the recall once more." I blink, caught off guard. I will?" "Yes." War's pupils shrink in unease. "But, Kaz—" "Enough," Kaz interrupts, his own pupils flaring. "The human has aided our efforts at great personal risk. We offered closure. It is time we delivered." He takes a deep breath, his booming voice softening as he addresses me directly. "However, you must understand the gravity of your request. There exists a possibility you may not emerge from this recall. The experience could destroy your mind entirely." Fear claws its way up my throat. War begins to pace, agitation evident in every movement. "Kaz, consider the implications. Another recall could compromise our ability to harvest the human's DNA. After our recent discovery—" Kaz cuts him off, his tone curt and final. "When the heretic created these humans, he did so believing that one day they would choose their own destiny. Perhaps that day has come." War turns back to me, desperate. "Your last recall provided us with invaluable data. If you go back, if your mind fractures, we may lose our best chance at saving humanity from the runaway." I shift uneasily, feeling like a rope in some cosmic tug-of-war. Both Vitar are staring at me intently. It's like being offered the series finale of the most important show in the universe, but told that watching it might doom all of humanity. The weight of the decision is almost paralyzing. "And if I can handle it?" I ask, carefully weighing each word. "If I survive another dip into the recall, is there a chance you could extract even more useful data? Could I maybe accelerate this salvation even more?" "Unlikely," Kaz replies. "But not impossible, right?" His pupils pulse slowly, and I recognize the wry amusement. "Correct. There is a slim possibility that additional data could further accelerate our countermeasures' development. However, consider your sister, Hope. If your genetic material is compromised, we cannot produce a viable clone. She will face her final moments without the comfort you wish to provide." It's true. The thought of Hope dying alone, thinking I'd abandoned her, is almost unbearable. And yet, I know my sister. Hope wouldn't want me to pass up a chance to save the universe, no matter what it cost. I take a deep breath, steeling myself. "Do it," I tell them. "Show me how this ends." The recall. My mind catches fire. I feel my consciousness fracture and split, shuddering beneath an unbearable force. For the third time, I descend into the collective recall, and this time I know I can't take it. My thoughts begin to burn up. My memories ignite, scorching to ashes as they're blown into the void. I'm losing time, losing all sense of self. My name. What was it again? Isaac? Ian? No, something else. My birthday. How old am I? 14? 48. Christ, I'm watching myself fall to pieces from the inside out, and it's terrifying. I'm forgetting who I am, what I am. Human? Vitarian? Who am I? And then it stops. All of it. The cacophony of panic, the missing memories, and the impossible fear. It all fades to black. No, not black. Space. I'm gazing out across the canvas of space. There's a ship there, a gleaming craft floating beyond a planet with rings, and suddenly, piece by piece, the memories come back. This is Saturn. The ship belongs to the heretic. And I'm here to investigate. I'm here to learn at last how this ends. I peek within, and the heretic paces relentlessly, his mind a storm of unease. The runaway is gone, vanished in pursuit of God, the distant one, or the edge. Whatever he's after, he's nowhere to be found. The heretic is worried. He does not think of his creation as volatile, as threatening, but if it were to make contact with the edge, that place where the laws of physics become unknowable and violent, then there's no telling what will happen. The consequences are unfathomable. No, he must intercept his child before he reaches the outer limits of existence. He must stop the runaway at all costs. But his ship, advanced as it is, lacks the capability to track him. His options are limited. He knows what must be done, yet it scares him, for there will be consequences, but perhaps not worse than the consequences of inaction. With trembling hands, he contacts the Chosen. They have the resources he needs, commanding the vast fleet of surveillance drones scattered throughout the cosmos. If they grant him access to these, perhaps, just perhaps, he can locate the runaway in time. He might persuade his child to remain within the bounds of our reality. The communication channel crackles to life. The Chosen's fury is immediate, palpable even across billions of light years. "What have you done?" they thunder, their collective voice resonating with rage. "Your arrogance has doomed us all." "It was never my intention," the heretic pleads, his voice quavering. "If we act swiftly, we can intercept him before he reaches the edge. There is still time to make this right." "Remain where you are," they order. The heretic complies, for he is no fool. He knows his reckoning has arrived. This is a disaster millennia in the making, and now he must face it head-on. The Chosen descend upon him like avenging angels, imprisoning the heretic for his sins. They deploy a fleet to intercept the runaway, and they nearly do. But he breaches the edge just as they near. They watch in horror as he vanishes beyond the furthest reaches of the universe, trespassing into the realm of eternity itself, into the domain of their God. Months become years. Years become decades. The Chosen torture the heretic. They demand he tell them everything he knows about the runaway, and he does, holding nothing back save for the birth of the human race. That is a secret that he cannot reveal. Humanity must endure. He believes they may yet be our only hope against the runaway. Decades stretch into centuries. The heretic languishes in chains, buried in a lightless prison beneath the surface of a dead world. The Chosen, nervous of the runaway returning, keep the heretic alive. They believe they may yet need him. 100 years pass, then 900 more. On the 1000th anniversary of the runaway's blasphemy, a scout ship reports an anomaly near the edge. Space there is behaving strangely. It's a phenomena they've seen only once before, when the runaway stepped beyond the edge to find God. Alarms ring. They echo across every Vitarian military vessel, and the Chosen High Council convenes an emergency session. They know well what this means. He is returning. The runaway is emerging from the edge. A Vitarian armada materializes, a swarm of gleaming vessels poised to intercept the runaway. As they converge, a collective gasp ripples through the recall. The runaway has changed. Gone is the human form. In its place floats an entity both familiar and alien. Its body, now sallow and elongated, twists in impossible geometries. Eyes, once windows to a human soul, have sunken into abyssal voids. Images cascade through the collective recall, searing themselves into the consciousness of every Vitarian. The heretic, summoned before the High Council, trembles as he beholds what his creation has become. This is not him, he whispers, his voice cratering. This is not my son. Then what is it? They demand, their pupils pulsing with fear and trepidation. But if the heretic knows, he does not speak of it. He watches in detached horror, his whole body trembling as 1,000 military vessels surround the runaway. Yet, his son does not flee. He floats idly just beyond the edge, unbothered by the building threat around him. "Surrender," booms the flagship, "or we will be forced to open fire." "Fire," the runaway answers, his words echoing across the universe. "You know nothing of fire." With a twist of his wrist, the runaway unleashes a nightmare. 1,000 warships shatter like glass, erupting in cerulean and obsidian flames. Video feeds blink out one by one, leaving only static in their wake. A lone surveillance droid, distant and unnoticed, captures the unfolding carnage. It beams the footage to the High Council and the heretic, who weeps silently, drowning in despair and regret. But the High Council has had 1,000 years to prepare for this. They are not yet finished. As the last of the warships burn to dust, they reveal a ring of planets surrounding the runaway. These planets have come a long way. They have been carted from distant solar systems, distant galaxies, and they have come here for one reason: to become dust. With the flick of a switch, ancient engines roar to life. 100 worlds lurch forward, accelerating towards their target. Their surfaces quake, their molten cores churning with building momentum. One by one, they collide with the runaway, burying him beneath a solar system, the resultant shockwaves shaking the galaxy. Light years away, the High Council watches with bated breath. The heretic, however, doesn't dare to look up, for he knows this godlike display of force is nothing compared to a god itself. As the last of the planets impact the runaway, as the last of their fire and fury fades to scattered rubble, he is revealed to be a mangled corpse. His torn carcass floats between the debris. Pieces of him are scattered millions of miles apart, and these images are shared across the collective recall. Vitarians rejoice, proclaiming the fall of the false god, the unseating of the pretender from his crooked throne. But their celebration is short-lived. Slowly at first, then with increasing speed, the fragments of the runaway begin to coalesce. Shattered limbs slam together, skull fragments fuse, and from this cosmic jigsaw emerges an abomination that defies comprehension. 9 arms writhe from a twisted torso perched atop 3 mismatched legs. Its bulbous head, draped with wisps of white hair, houses a dozen eyes, each swirling with a vortex of cosmic abyss. The heretic's hearts sink. This thing before them is no longer his child, no longer alive in any recognizable sense. It has transcended life, death, and everything in between. It is something new, something less. But the High Council is not convinced. 1,000 years is a long time, and it's longer still for a race as advanced as the Vitar. They have suffered wars that have ended solar systems, turned whole galaxies into wastelands, and so they are no strangers to violence. This runaway, he will learn his place, one way or another. Those planets were never meant to end the monster. No, they were merely an opening salvo, a distraction to give the High Council time to prepare their real weapon. And now, the fuse is lit. In the static-laced feed of a distant drone, the heretic watches as a red, hypergiant star begins to pulsate. Tendrils of plasma lash out from its swollen surface. It throbs, hums with building energy. This is it, the most powerful weapon in the Vitarian arsenal, and they're triggering it on one of the largest stars in all the universe. Supernova. There's a flash of light and the drone feed goes dead. Another drone is tapped from a neighboring system, and it reveals a terrible sphere that's growing. It's an explosion that's engulfing everything within millions, billions of miles. It's stretching outward, consuming everything in its path. Planets, stars, and entire solar systems are vaporized in the cosmic inferno of a dying titan. When the light finally fades, it reveals nothing. Multiple star systems reduced to less than ash, all wiped from existence. Even the runaway is no more. It seems too good to be true. The heretic wants to believe, but he can't. He knows just what his creation is capable of, having already seen it recover from being splintered into pieces and scattered across space. He may be atomized, but... And there, cold dread grips the heretic's hearts. Slowly, pieces of matter begin to grow in the void. They grow and they grow, reforming until the runaway's screaming mouth emerges from a body now wholly unrecognizable as human. It's a skeletal figure, long and decrepit, with dozens of limbs and 1,000 teeth. Its eyes have become one, and within it, there is emptiness. But the Vitarians aren't finished. At the epicenter of the fading supernova, a new horror takes shape. Matter and light are drawn inexorably inward, spiraling towards a singularity of unimaginable power. The hypergiant's death throes have given birth to a supermassive black hole, its gravitational pull so immense that even distant galaxies feel its hunger. The runaway writhes helplessly. He's weakened, still reeling from the largest explosion since the birth of the cosmos. The event horizon calls to him. It beckons, dragging him toward the most powerful trash compactor in all the universe, and for the first time in millennia, he feels what it means to be powerless. Across the collective recall, the High Council's triumphant declaration reverberates. Now we will crush him. A thunderous cheer erupts from Vitarian throats. Now we will break his bones. The cheer swells, a tidal wave of hope and vengeance. Now we will unmake the Unmaker. Their voices rise to a fever pitch, a symphony of victory. We do this for all chosen, to bring glory to the distant one. The euphoria spreads like wildfire. Through the recall, the heretic witnesses Vitarians flooding the streets, their jubilation manifesting in song, dance, and fervent prayer. Arms raised skyward, they chant ancient scriptures, certain that their judgment day has arrived. This, they believe, is their final test, their gateway to ascension, to joining the distant one in the edge. But the heretic sees what they cannot. As the High Council exchanges congratulations, the heretic's gaze remains fixed on the unfolding tug-of-war. He notices a subtle shift. The black hole's pull on the runaway begins to wane. The abomination's velocity drops from millions of miles per second to thousands, then mere hundreds. And as he approaches the event horizon, where the very fabric of space-time warps and tears, the runaway does something he hasn't done in a millennium. He opens his mouth, takes a breath, and this black hole, this unfathomable behemoth capable of devouring entire solar systems, is drawn into him like wisps of smoke. His grotesque jaws snap shut, swallowing the unswallowable. I had almost forgotten, the runaway rasps, his guttural voice echoing in the minds of all of creation. What pain feels like. He blinks out of existence. Terror etches itself across the faces of the High Council. The heretic collapses, racked by sobs, for he alone knows that what comes next will be a horror that none can imagine. "End this," he pleads, voice cracking with despair. "End us all." And in his mind, he hears screaming. In all of their minds, they hear screaming. Chaos erupts across the collective recall. They watch as Vitarians flee in blind panic, pursued by a mangled creature with an eye like a melting star. He is here. The runaway has come. "You!" the High Council roars, rounding on the heretic. "We showed you leniency, but it's clear that the distant one demands your blood." A foot presses down on the heretic's head. An executioner's blade glints in the harsh light. "Please," the heretic gasps. "If you have any sense, you'll grant this entire planet the mercy of death." "This began with you," they snarl, "and so it shall end with you." And the blade comes down. The heretic's head is cleaved from his body, and as his consciousness begins to slip, his final wish is for everything they said to be true. Frantic, the High Council scours the recall, their desperation mounting with each passing moment. Surely, they think, the distant one will intervene at any second. He will smite this abomination, this evil made flesh, and they will ascend to join him. They've proven their loyalty. The heretic is dead, isn't he? What more is there left for them to do? But the screaming doesn't stop. The recall is flooded with endless suffering, a torrent of pleas for aid and mercy. Helpless, the High Council bears witness as Vitarians are pulled apart, piece by piece. They watch as the runaway infiltrates their very consciousness, cutting up their thoughts and marrying the agony of their bodies with the agony of their minds. "Please," the High Council begs, prostrating themselves on the floor. "Help us, distant one!" A deafening crack splits the air. The runaway materializes before them, levitating above their table. His torso is a writhing mass of limbs, his large eye blazing with the heat of 1 billion dead stars. His form is draped in a grotesque patchwork of blood and skin, none of it his to wear. "Deliver us from this evil," the High Council cries. "Restore that which is holy," they plead. "Unmake the pretender," they beg. Destroy the false god! They shriek. And the runaway spreads a dozen crooked arms, tilts his grotesque head, and for the second time in 1,000 years, he takes a breath. An uneven smile slips across his lips. He tells them, "I already have." 12 October 1991. I'm drowning in vomit. Strong hands wrench me to the side. What's left of my dinner splatters across the deck, and I hack, sputter. My eyes are bulging, my heart is racing, and it feels like 100 tiny explosions are going off across the surface of my brain. Human. Kez's voice cuts through the haze. He turns my face towards him. Human, respond. A weak noise escapes me. Words tangle on my tongue as I struggle on all fours. I'm alive, I rasp, each syllable a battle. An hour, War says, fingers combing through my sweat-matted hair. You were gone an hour. We readied the vat for your corpse, hoping to salvage what scraps of data we could. He gestures to a sunken tank, drained of the azure fluid that fills the others. The world's a smear of color, slowly sharpening into focus. I'm okay, I manage. Just a little woozy. Did you witness it? War asks. Vitar's end. Yeah, I croak. But that was forever ago. Where's the runaway now? War and Kez are quiet. It's as though they're not certain how to go about answering the question, like they're worried it'll unearth memories better left buried. He remains on Vitar, Kez finally says, eyes downcast. He is savoring our people's torment. He dissects them, body and mind, and when death claims them, he puts them back together once more, begins anew. None can escape. War nods, a slight tremor in his voice. We were off-world when he struck, monitoring the edge. When the recall showed us those images, we fled. He'll find you, I say. Oh yes, War's voice is a whisper. He will find us, the Earth, everything. Once he tires of our kind, he will deliver his pain upon humanity. Your predisposition toward companionship birthed his turmoil, drove him to confront our God, and I do not believe he is capable of forgiving you for this. I shake my head, mind reeling. It's almost too much to imagine. Some omnipotent sadist torturing millions for thousands of years, remaking them every time they die. How? I choke out. How do you stop that? I mean, they hurled freaking solar systems at him, supernovas, black holes. What can a couple of Vitarians possibly do? We will destroy him as we were destroyed, Kez explains, resting a hand on a nearby vat. Inside floats a man, half dissolved, face melting away. And we will destroy him as he was created. We are designing a virus of hyper-evolution, mirroring the runaway's own capabilities. But this virus will outpace even his adaptations. It will consume him from within. My gaze sweeps the room, vats of liquefied humans, tubes snaking out of them into a central console. Atop it sits a capsule, its contents roiling, seething. That's it? I ask, nodding towards the capsule. The virus? Yes. War's pupils contract. It is unfinished, but we pray it will be ready before he turns his sights to your world. How long? My voice is barely audible. 214 years, Kez intones. Tears well in my eyes. 2 centuries? That's an eternity. What if... Correction. War interrupts, studying the readout on his arm. That was our previous estimate. Your recall data has accelerated our timetable considerably, and assuming your deconstruction goes smoothly... His long fingers tap the display. It may be ready in as little as 33 years. 33. It might as well have been a million, knowing what we were up against. And what do you call it? I ask. The virus, I mean. Kez tilts his head. Query unclear. A name serves no purpose. The virus has a function, and it will either succeed or fail in it, and that is all that we are concerned with. No purpose? I say, incredulous. Come on, Kez. This thing is the universe's last hope. It's humanity's. That's a big deal, isn't it? Something like that deserves a name. It deserves to be remembered. War's readout flashes. Your cortisol is spiking, human. Your clone will have no memory of this, so such an emotional response is illogical. Additionally, we must begin deconstruction immediately if you wish to visit your sister before she expires. The clone will require a day's preparation. I open my mouth to speak, but I don't know what to say. Tears leak from my eyes. I sniffle, wiping at them as I feel my heart crushed beneath the weight of my grief. My sister, Hope. She's dying in the hospital, and I won't even get to say goodbye. The best she'll get is some lab-grown copycat. And on top of that, there's a mad god rampaging across the universe that could show up on our doorstep at any second. My legs give out. I crumple to the floor, and for the first time since I was little, I cry my eyes out. I lean my head against the vat of a dead person, and I start to bawl. For Hope, for myself, for every Vitarian who's dying over and over just to satisfy the twisted whims of a cosmic sadist. A hand grips my shoulder. I look up through a veil of tears. It is time, Kez says softly. Are you prepared? Sure, I mutter. Why not? We all die someday, right? Kez helps me to my feet, guides me toward an empty vat. Human, Isaiah Mitchell. It distresses you that we have not named this virus. Why? I draw a shuddering breath, drowning in my own emotions. I don't know. I fumble for words. It's the most important thing ever created, and it's just nameless. It feels wrong. Can't you see that? No, he says simply, helping me into the vat. I step into the transparent tank, wishing I could be as emotionally hollow as the Vitarians. It might make this whole self-sacrifice thing easier. Liquid begins to flow, pooling around my feet. It tingles like anesthetic. What would you name this virus? Kez asks from above. What would I try to think, but I can't bring myself to focus on the virus, the fallen god, or even the end of the damn universe. All I can think about is her, my sister. I'm thinking about how much I'm going to miss her, how much I wish I could have said goodbye. I'm remembering the way she'd pull out a board game, close my bedroom door, and crank Bon Jovi to drown out Mom and Dad arguing. I'm remembering the dinner she'd cook us while our parents were passed out on the couch. I'm remembering all this and more. Isaiah, Kez says, his voice growing distant. The name? The liquid is around my chest now. I squint up at Kez, my mind already beginning to feel slow and hazy. This is it, I realize. The final frontier. I give Kez a smile, and I say the last word I'll ever speak. Present day. Lisa leads me to the far reaches of the spacecraft, deep enough that crews haven't gotten around to rigging it with lighting yet, so we're doing this the old-fashioned way. Lisa's making shadow puppets with her flashlight. You have to admit this one looks like a giraffe, she says, twisting her fingers in a way that looks nothing like a giraffe. We almost there? I grumble. She drops her hands with a dramatic sigh. Yeah, it's just ahead. What's crawled up your ass tonight, Mitchell? I bristle. What's that supposed to mean? I mean, it's usually me that's all business. You're the dick everything slips off of like cellophane, but Now you're all brooding and serious. So what gives? She swings the flashlight into my eyes. Quit it. You trying to blind me? Just needed to see your face, she laughs. Had to make sure the aliens hadn't possessed you or something. I roll my eyes so hard I'm surprised they don't fall out of my head. Give me a break. A break? You only just got to work, she quips, snorting at her own wit. Her light catches a scrap of paper tacked above a doorway. D34. This is our stop, Captain Workaholic. After you. Scowling, I duck through the entrance. In the far corner, a cluster of portable lamps illuminates a team bustling around what looks like, oh God, a field of vats, each one housing a human corpse. It's real, I mutter, my stomach doing somersaults. Christ almighty, it's all real. Lisa shoulders past me, all business now. Major Luca, she hollers. Major Luca, you in here? A woman in a lab coat and dust mask strides over, a camo green patch on her chest identifying her as our target. Agents, she greets us, tugging down her mask. Glad you could make it. The bodies are this way. Luca guides us through the labyrinth of tanks. Lab techs hover over the vats, dipping collection rods to harvest DNA samples. Others drain viscous fluid with handheld pumps. My heart's doing the cha-cha against my ribcage. This is it. The place that's been haunting my dreams, brought to life in all the worst ways. Here we are, Luca announces, stopping in front of a gray tarp. I crouch down, steeling myself as I lift the edge of it. 2 massive corpses lie beneath, their skin scaled, teeth like serrated knives, claws that could disembowel a grizzly, and tails that look strong enough to crush concrete. Once, I'd have called them monsters. Now they look like old friends. Their names are Kez and War. Lisa lets out a low whistle, circling the bodies. Nasty customers, huh? Good thing they weren't up and kicking when we busted in. Bet they'd have gone all xenomorph on our asses. She mimes a facehugger attack, complete with ridiculous expressions. Luca chuckles. Meanwhile, I'm lost in my thoughts. I can't tear my eyes away from the dead Vitarians. How? How could they let this happen? They were the most advanced species in the history of the cosmos, so how the hell did they get shot down by something as archaic as an F-35? Did the pilot file a report? I ask, my voice distant. Lisa's eyebrows shoot up. You're looking at the first real flesh and blood aliens that anybody's ever seen, and you're asking about paperwork? She shakes her head. Mitchell, I'm telling you, you're losing it. The report, I insist, fighting to keep my voice level. What did the pilot see? Why'd they fire on the UAP? Luca glances at Lisa, who heaves a suffering sigh. Fine, let's get this over with, Lisa says. The pilot picked up a weird signature on radar, went to check it out. Says he saw this massive craft flickering in and out of existence. There 1 second, gone the next. Real Twilight Zone shit. Figured it might be some next-gen Chinese tech, so we called it in. Before he could finish his report, though, the UAP fired off something. Something? I echo, my brain working overtime. Like a weapon, or... Lisa shrugs. Your guess is as good as mine. That's what the pilot assumed, though it might be a preemptive strike, so he gave it hell, emptied everything he had into it. And what was it really? What did the UAP actually launch? Like I said, no clue. Whatever it was, NASA tracked it hauling ass out of our atmosphere. Last ping they got was it screaming past Neptune about an hour ago. I shake my head, pieces of the puzzle starting to click. Maybe whatever the Vitarians fired took so much juice that they had to divert power from everything else. Cloaking, shields, the works. It's the only explanation that makes a lick of sense. No way in hell an F-35 should have been able to touch them otherwise. There's more, ma'am. Major Luca chimes in, her voice hushed and anxious. After I radioed about the bodies, my team found something else. We think it might have been the payload, or at least where it was housed before launch. Show me, I demand, shouldering past Lisa. Now. Yes, sir. The Major hustles through the maze of vats, and I'm right on her heels, chewing my thumbnail down to the quick. There's a knot of dread in my gut, a creeping certainty that my nightmares weren't just fever dreams. They were more real than I ever was. All around us are tanks of dissolving humans, and I can't help but wonder how many of their clones are walking around topside right now. Did the real Isaiah Mitchell feel anything as he melted away? I wonder if he'd hate me now. It's here, Luca announces, stopping in front of a steel-gray console, another relic of my memories. She points to an empty pedestal on top, a circular hole punched through its center. We think the payload was right here, she explains, her eyes darting over the row of vats, disgust twisting her features. Best we can figure, the aliens were using human DNA to cook up some kind of bioweapon. That's probably what they launched tonight. A bioweapon? Lisa says, breathless as she catches up. Christ, did I hear that right? Were they trying to wipe us out and just missed? Luca swallows hard, the color draining from her face. Maybe. Or perhaps it operates on principles similar to an ICBM, but scaled up. Instead of breaching our atmosphere and circling back, it's punching through our entire solar system. For all we know, whatever they launched is still accelerating out there. It could be coming back. Lisa fires off a response. Luca counters. They volley back and forth, their voices fading to white noise. At some point, I think Lisa might be trying to drag me into the conversation. But my mind is light years away. No, it's decades away. I take a step toward the console, drawn to that empty pedestal. This is where it sat. The virus War and Kez had been building to destroy the Runaway. And there, beneath it, a label. It might be the only label in this otherwise unmarked ship, obscured by dust and made faint by years of wear. Lisa grabs my arm. Earth to Mitchell, you in there? I mumble something in response, but I couldn't tell you what. Words. Just words. Just like the word beneath that pedestal. It's a word that brings back memories, but not memories of drifting corpses or imploding stars or eldritch horrors and the end of creation. No, this is a word that brings back memories of a hospital room. White. Sterile. Inside of it, a girl is lying in a bed, and her skin is pallid and thin. She's having trouble breathing. Tubes are pouring into her throat, doing their best to keep her alive. But she doesn't have long. This girl is dying, and she's the most important thing to me in the entire world. Chin up, she's telling me, and her frail hand rests against my own. She's smiling. She's 17 years old, dying before she's had a chance to live, and she's smiling because she knows that's what I need to see. Everything will be okay, she whispers. You'll see. But I think about our mom and dad. I think about how right now they're passed out on the couch, and how maybe, if I'm lucky, they'll drink themselves to death before I get home. I think about the bruises up and down my arms. I think about the moment my guardian angel intervened, pulling my dad off of me, just in time for him to shove her backward down the stairs. I think about the sound her body made as it hit the floor, how still she was. And now I'm here, and she's smiling at me, and she's telling me that everything is going to be okay, even though I know that it isn't. I know that nothing will ever be okay ever again. I don't want you to go, I tell her, and I squeeze her hand as gently as I can, tears pouring from my eyes. Please don't. And I know that it's selfish. I know that it's pointless. I know that my older sister is dying whether I like it or not, and that putting this on her at the very end is cruel. But I'm just a kid. I know if I don't try, I'll always wonder if it might have worked, If maybe I had just asked, then she might have stayed. The machine that's beeping in tune with her heart starts to slow. She leans forward, presses her forehead to mine. I have to go, she murmurs. But don't think for a second I won't be watching over you. Dizzy Izzy? Beep. I blink back tears. Promise? Beep. Sure, she rasps, pulling me into a frail hug. That's what big sisters are for, right? And we hold each other like that until the beeping stops. I'm talking to you! Lisa's voice cuts through my reverie like a knife. Huh? Oh, now he speaks. Lisa's eyes are wild with panic, her hair a disheveled mess. She fumbles with her flask, taking another long pull. What's wrong? I ask. She wipes her mouth with the back of her hand, her voice clipped and urgent. Look, she says, if this thing really is a bioweapon, we need intel. Now, like yesterday. Just because we've lost visual doesn't mean it isn't coming back to bite us in the ass. She yanks out a crudely printed map, jabbing at it with a trembling finger. Here's the plan. I'll coordinate a sweep of Alpha through Delta corridors. You take Echo through Hotel. We're looking for anything. Records, data, a post-it note with how to build a fucking doomsday weapon scrawled on it. Got it? Right. I mumble, still half lost in my memories. I'm on it, Lise. Great. She's already moving, practically jogging away, her fists clenched so tight I can see her knuckles turning white. I'm fucked, she's muttering over and over. There's a goddamn bioweapon out there and I don't know jack shit about it. I am so fucking fucked! I look back to the console, to the empty pedestal where the virus once sat, and I think to myself that what Lisa's saying isn't quite true. We do know something about this. My fingers brush the dust from beneath the pedestal, revealing the worn label. On it is a single word, scratched by a Vitarian claw 30 years ago. It's a name. A virus like this shouldn't need a name. Kez told me as much. But if it had one, well, I think I would have named it after my guardian angel. I think I would have called it Hope. You've been listening to His Crooked Gospel Part 2 by J.G. Martin. J.G. Martin writes about monsters and the things they get up to when we aren't looking. His work has been featured across a slew of podcasts, captivating millions of listeners around the globe. Martin currently resides in British Columbia with his cat and editor, Opie. His ultimate dream is to one day own a secret lair behind a bookshelf. For a story with such huge breadth, handling some truly supernova-sized themes, J.G. Martin manages to stick the landing with a well-written and touching character moment. And in the meantime, we got some cosmic warfare on a scale that I don't usually see. I'll admit that the Warhammer 40k fan in me was hoping we were getting an alternate background for the Emperor of Mankind, but I can't be mad. JG, that was an amazing story, and I'm honored that I got to share it with you all. After a tale of that size, my voice is parched, so I'll wrap up here. Tune in next week for more Horror Hill, and until then, stay spooky. You've been listening to the Horror Hill Podcast, a production of Chilling Entertainment and the creative team at Chilling Tales for Dark Nights. Tonight's episode was hosted, narrated, scored, and finalized by yours truly, Eric Peabody. Additional music by Nikki McSorley. Got a terrifying tale of your own that you'd like performed? Email it to us at submissions@simplyscarypodcast.com to have your work considered for future production. Note that any writing utilizing artificial intelligence is ineligible. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, why not help us spread our dark presence online? You can follow Chilling Tales for Dark Nights on social media, and upvote, subscribe, and hit the bell notification icon if you're listening to this on YouTube. It helps us out a lot and also keeps you up to date on new episodes. If you'd like access to uninterrupted horror, free of ads and these annoying bookend segments, might I recommend signing up to be a patron? You'll get access to hundreds of episodes of this show, as well as everything from the other programs in the Chilling Tales for Dark Nights cabal. That means all of Scary Stories Told in the Dark, Drew Blood's Dark Tales, and more. It's a veritable smorgasbord of horrific delights. Head to chillingtalesfordarknights.com to get started. If you're looking for someone to narrate or handle audio production for your own personal project, I just so happen to know a guy. Email me at ericpeabodyvoice@gmail.com. That's ErikPeabodyvoice@gmail.com, and we can talk details. If darkness is what you're after, listener, your search is over. Yet, let it be known, you haven't found the darkness. The darkness has found you.
Chilling Tales for Dark Nights. Chilling Tales for Dark Nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
It's time to turn off the lights and turn on the dark.
Chilling Tales for Dark Nights.
Good evening, listener, and welcome back to Chilling Tales for Dark Nights. I'm Nicholas Goroff, once again filling in for Steve Taylor tonight, and I'm honored to be keeping you company in the dark. Tonight's episode explores a simple question with a complicated answer. What happens when help arrives, but the cost was never truly understood? When desperation meets opportunity, when pride collides with deception, and when hunger of every kind finds a voice, the results can be catastrophic. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't a blade or a bullet. Sometimes it's a song. But before we begin tonight's featured tale, we have just a few important announcements. First, if you've been following the excitement of Evil Idol 2025, don't forget to subscribe to the Chilling Tales for Dark Nights YouTube channel and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. The competition continues to heat up and you won't want to miss what's coming next. You can also find Chilling Tales for Dark Nights on all major podcast platforms. If you enjoy what we do, please take a moment to leave us a 5-star rating and review. It helps more than you know, and it helps other horror fans find their way here. Looking for even more terror? Visit chillingtalesfordarknights.com and become a member today. For just $7.99 per month, or at a discounted annual rate, you'll receive early access to episodes, ad-free listening, exclusive bonus content, and access to our complete back catalog of chilling tales. If you love horror, there's no better place to immerse yourself. Be sure to follow us on social media as well. You can find us on Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok, where we share updates, previews, and behind-the-scenes content from across the network. Now then, let's turn our attention to tonight's feature. Tonight's story was originally featured on Scary Stories Told in the Dark, Season 7, Episode 2, which first aired on August 18th, 2020. We're bringing it back to you tonight for a very special reason. This episode serves as a tribute to one of the foundational voices of our network, Otis Geary. A longtime contributor and alum of Chilling Tales for Dark Nights, Otis was also the original host of Scary Stories Told in the Dark before Malcolm Blackwood took up the mantle. His distinctive voice and commanding presence helped define the sound of horror for countless listeners across hundreds of episodes. Tonight's tale, written by Tanya Brown and performed by Otis Geary, showcases that talent in full force. Produced by Craig Groshek, this story is a dark fable of pride, deception, and consequences, where music becomes a weapon, contracts become curses, and hunger becomes something far more literal than anyone expected. So settle in, dim the lights, and listen closely. From author Tanya Brown, we present Calliope.
Nothing came to Phosphor Flats unless it came to die. That's what Calvin's dad told him, so that's what he believed. Even at 13, he was pretty sure he knew the truth when he heard it. Nothing good had ever come from the small, dusty town, and little had ever come all the time he had lived there. And considering he'd been born and raised in Phosphor Flats, that's saying a mighty lot. So the afternoon, a fancy wagon rolled into town. Calvin couldn't help but wonder what it was here for. It sure as heck didn't look like something that came here to die. The wagon was a huge thing, the size of a small house drawn by a pair of even larger oxen. Giant words all along the painted walls of yellow and green and purple proclaimed that the owner was here to help out the average citizen, that he was the cure for your every problem. What you think it's here for? Wyatt asked. Calvin shrugged. He didn't like Wyatt, but he liked the looks of the wagon even less. It was too flashy, too showy. The driver was even gaudier. A tall, thin man with wild graying hair sat in a single bucket seat at the head of the wagon. His clothes were as strange as he was. His suit, a nauseating patchwork of garish colors, hung loosely from his lanky frame. A blood-red string tie rested under his bearded chin, the ludicrous ensemble topped by a simple white straw hat. The man's smile was bright and wide and unsettling. Nah, Calvin didn't like the look of him at all. Don't know. Must be selling something. Too much writing on it to not be selling something. Yeah, Wyatt said. That's what I thought, too. Calvin doubted that was what Wyatt thought, because Wyatt's thoughts were never more than 2 feet from underneath the skirt of Lucy Stacks. The wagon came to a stop at the edge of the steps on which the boys were seated. The driver crawled down from the bucket seat, approaching the pair until they stood a few feet in front of the general store, all smile and strangeness and something else, something Calvin couldn't quite put his finger on. "Afternoon, young men," the man said, his voice tinged with some strange accent. The creak of a door sounded from behind them, followed by the hollow clap of well-worn boots on the wooden porch. Calvin looked up to see his dad standing over him. "Hey there," his father said. "Hello. Well met." The stranger nodded to the building. "Are you the proprietor of this lovely establishment?" "Yes, sir." "Nice, very nice." Calvin's dad narrowed his eyes. "Can I help you with something? You seem lost." "Lost?" the stranger asked, then chuckled as if the very idea of such a thing amused him. "Never. I always make a point to know exactly where I am, and in fact, I came all the way out here to help you." "Help us?" asked Sheriff Parker, quite out of breath but trying hard not to give the impression that he had just run the several hundred yards up from the one-room jailhouse. Calvin was beginning to wonder when the lawman was going to join the thick of things. The sheriff of a town as small as Phosphor had more time on his hands than a watchmaker's shop, so something like this was bound to be big news. And speaking of news, the street was starting to fill up with folks. Men, women, and children all filed out into the late afternoon to see what the heck was going on with the stranger and his alluring wagon. On an average day, most of these folks would have been back at their farms and ranches, working the land or tending their herds. But the stranger had rolled in on a Saturday, a day when nearly all of the town folk were about, sharing fellowship as well as gossip. Sheriff Parker joined Calvin's dad on the steps and asked, "What kind of help, mister?" "Elijah F. Topplepot, at your service," the stranger said, then held his arms out and bowed low, almost to the ground. Calvin's dad snorted. "And what service would that be?" Topplepot lifted his head, that eerie grin a mile wide, as he eyed Calvin's dad a moment before he said, "Why, I'm here to get rid of your rat infestation." A gasp rippled through the assembly of townsfolk. Sheriff Parker's head cocked back at the words, as if he couldn't believe the man had just said them. Calvin's dad shot Parker a sideways glance, then gave his son a quick frown. Calvin could hear Wyatt swallow hard beside him. Everyone seemed surprised, and rightly so. How could a complete stranger possibly know that Phosphor Flats was facing one of the worst rat infestations in the small town's history? It started perhaps a month ago, just little signs here and there, nibbles taken from cornbread left to cool, holes in flour sacks, apples half-eaten right in the barrel. Nothing out of the ordinary for springtime in a rural town. Then people started to see them. Rats swarming over the wheat stores, rats piled up in the fruit bins, rats swimming up and down Dewey Creek. And not just normal run-of-the-mill vermin either. No, these rats were the size of cats, with tails almost twice as long and crimson eyes that flashed in the dark, hinting at an unusual intelligence. They didn't seem scared of folks at all, either, hissing and biting whenever a human approached, instead of scurrying off to find safer fare. And they were unstoppable. In fact, the town had just held an emergency meeting on how to handle the problem, which resulted in the singular suggestion by Doc Jenkins to poison the entire lot. This would have been a fine idea, save for the fact that the town housed neither the required amounts of poison, nor anyone with the wherewithal to purchase it. In the end, it was agreed that everyone would do what they could, which turned out not to be a whole lot. "You've got to be kidding me," Parker said. Topplepot raised himself to his full height, almost offended by the remark. "I never jest about my line of work, gentlemen." "Forgive us for sounding ungrateful," Calvin's dad said, "but we're just a little surprised. How did you know that you had a rat problem?" Topplepot asked over him. "It's my business to know. But, more plainly put, I've been chasing this infestation for nearly a year now." "Chasing?" Parker asked. "Yes, chasing. Why, I've been trailing this little pack of particular pests all the way here from Three Forks Way." Calvin's dad's eyes went wide. "That's over 100 miles. The man nodded. "I know, and I'm afraid my companions here have felt every inch of it." He paused to pat the rump of the nearest ox, which turned in place to stare at his master with distaste. Calvin swore the man sneered at the oxen, giving them a look that said they should keep their snouts shut if they knew what was good for them. Then the man turned back to the now sizable crowd and began to do what Calvin could only describe as putting on a show. Ladies and gentlemen, I am a man with a purpose. I've been from the Mississippi to the Rio Grande. I've traveled from the Appalachians to the Pacific Ocean. I've seen many a fine town along my way. And may I stop to say for a moment that this is a lovely little place you have built here. Very nice indeed. But as I was saying, I've seen many a town along the way. Towns just like yours, overrun by the very same vermin that taunt you even as we speak. Some of these towns I was able to assist. They welcomed a modest working man like myself to take on their worries and lift them from their fears, driving the very source of their concern from their settlement, freeing them from their vexation by proper extermination. A wave of excitement ran through the onlookers. Calvin had to admit that he was even curious. Could this man do what he claimed? Could he exterminate the problem? The man's eyes narrowed and his voice took on a cold clip. But then there were some, only a few, mind you, who doubted my talents. Towns who thought they could handle the vermin on their own. My good people, I stand before you today humbled by the experience of what I saw, of what happened to those poor citizens who took my serious profession into their own hands and their own doom. He hung his head and fell quiet. The crowd looked to one another. Everyone wanted to know what Topplepot saw, yet they were afraid to ask. But not Calvin. What did you see? He piped up. Topplepot cocked his head at Calvin as he said, Nothing. The crowd gave a collective groan, disappointed by the response. The man drew a deep breath and started his tirade again. Nothing at all was left of these villages by the time the rats were done with them. Everyone fell into a shamed hush. Topplepot's voice echoed over their silence. I'm not here to tell you good townspeople that what you're dealing with is no ordinary breed of rat. They're vicious, they're violent, and they're not to be underestimated. But I, Elijah F. Topplepot, am here to do whatever it takes to rid you of this plague brought upon your lovely town. I will try, no, yea, verily, I shall rid you of these beasts once and for all. A gentle applause rose from the group, though most looked as if they were in some sort of half-trance brought on by the man's sing-song voice and wild eyes. How? Calvin asked. Topplepot turned to Calvin, a bemused look on his thin face. Excuse me, son? Calvin shrank under the man's gaze, but those eyes couldn't kill his curiosity. How? How are you going to do it, sir? Topplepot gave Calvin an all-too-knowing wink. I'm glad you asked, young man. So very glad you asked. The man stepped to the back of the wagon, where a red lever ran flush against the bulk of the wood. With a grunt, he gave the lever a sharp yank. At the pull, all four walls of the wagon fell away, unfolding and slipping back like the wings of an exotic bird, until there was only a platform between the wheels. Upon the platform sat a contraption unlike anything Calvin had ever seen in his short life. Ladies and gentlemen, Topplepot said, I give to you the Calliope. It was as garish as the wagon, as gaudy as the man, made up of bright colors and even brighter cogs. Dazzling copper pipes of all sizes, from a few inches to nearly as tall as the man himself, lined the back half of the platform, shining and glowing in the afternoon sun. Before these lay a complex series of gears and pistons, intertwined in a convoluted array, all attached to a large metal drum at the head of the works. The drum itself was covered with bumps, mounted on a single arm and braced against a line of small metal thumbs. At the front of the mechanism, near Topplepot, was a small board with a series of buttons and pulls and switches, and a single hand crank. Would you like a demonstration? Topplepot asked. Calvin nodded. He very much would. The man turned to his machine, pulled at the pulleys, and pushed a few buttons, then flipped a few switches before he said, "This is on its lowest setting. Just a small taste of what it can do. But I think you'll find it will satisfy any more questions you," he paused and nodded to Calvin's dad, "or anyone else might have." Topplepot turned the hand crank, spinning the drum against the metal thumbs, and the air came alive with faint music. It was a light, subtle, and carefree tune, full of soft whistles, bright whirs, and clicks. The gears kept exquisite time, spinning the drum into the metal thumbs, which flicked against the bumps, feeding the resulting pattern into the pipes where the music poured forth. The tune was lovely, made Calvin want to smile, but he didn't understand what good it would do until he realized for whom the music was intended. Rats, a good 100 or more, came pouring from the general store, filing into the street in a single brown, obedient line. Women screamed. Men grunted in disgust. Everyone scooted to the far side of the street as the rats lined up in front of the machine and its absurd tune. There the vermin sat, all red-eyed but passive, as if waiting for their next musical command. Topplepot paused in his cranking long enough to flip a few more switches before he started again. A new tune emerged, similar to the last, but with a few notable differences. At the sound, the rats turned as one, heading down the street, shuffling quietly out of town, until they were almost out of sight. Topplepot released the hand crank, the music stopped, replaced all at once by a thin popping sound, like the noise of a gun being fired from very far off. In the distance, the obedient line of brown burst into a hazy cloud of red, then was gone. The crowd was breathless, as well as silent. "There you are, ladies and gents," Topplepot said, "and for the simple fee of only $1,000, I can rid your entire town of your nemesis." No one said a thing, except for the sheriff. "Well, then," Sheriff Parker said, as jovial and as warm as the man had ever been in his life, "let's find a place for you to put them oxen up while we discuss the terms of your contract." Calvin's dad caught Parker by the arm before he could make his way down the steps. He whispered, "What do you think you're doing?" Parker whispered back, "This man can take the rats away. It's the answer to our prayers, David." Calvin's father looked back at Topplepot a moment before he added, in another whisper, "But we don't have what he's asking. Not even among all of us." Parker gritted his teeth and hissed through them, "Yes, but he doesn't know that. Just keep your trap shut and follow my lead." Calvin's dad looked worried at first, then, the whole thing settling on him like a slow rolling fog, a thin smile came to his lips. He passed a glance over the crowd, where just about everyone was smiling, as wide as he, and gave a sharp nod in agreement. Parker winked in return to his wooing of the exterminator. "Now then, Mr. Topplepot, I think—" "Topplepot," the man corrected him. "Sure, Topplepot. Whatever you say, Jackson." Parker paused and motioned to the big blacksmith. "Unhook his pack and stable him." He turned back to the tall man, having to crane his neck to look him in the face. "All free of charge, of course." The tall man looked down on the short sheriff as he echoed, "Of course." Calvin half expected Johnson to tell Parker to go to heck, but the blacksmith leapt to the job like he was making $1 million for just unhitching the team. Some silent understanding had taken place among the townsfolk, some quiet concurrence on what they were about to do. The men of the town crowded around the stranger in his wagon, making plans for a job that even a kid knew no one in town could afford. They ushered him into the Jack's Tavern, everyone talking at once about how glad they were that the man showed up just when he did. How lucky they were that he rolled into town, and how relieved they would be when this was all over. Calvin and Wyatt snuck around the side of Jack's Tavern so they could listen in on the proceedings. Over the next few hours, a deal was struck. For $1,000, the man would drive the rats out of town that very evening. $1,000. That kind of money was unheard of in a small town like Phosphor Flats. Calvin couldn't believe that a man as clever as this Topplepot appeared to be would even begin to imagine that anyone here could have $100, much less $1,000. Topplepot was treated like a hero for the job he had yet to accomplish. He was given things the town folk could provide, a fine meal, a few healthy drinks, and all the local stories he could stand. When sundown arrived, the man was in good humor, to say the least, and maybe that was the plan after all. Calvin could only watch and pray the adults knew what they were doing. Out of all the places I've visited, Topplepot said as the crowd gathered again outside the general store, I do believe I like Phosphor Flats the best. Calvin hoped the man remembered that fondness when the bill came due. How does your machine work, mister? Harmonics, Topplepot said, as if that explained everything. Har what? Calvin asked. Harmonics, the man repeated. He gave a little sigh when he realized that Calvin was confused. All sound transmit to the brain via the ears in the language of wavelengths. And these waves are the very same thing your brain itself speaks to your body through. So, you with me so far, son? Calvin nodded, but it was a lie. Well, the calliope taps into those wavelengths by manipulating the frequencies in which the brain and the body of a subject relate to one another. It controls the waves, alters them, forcing the listener to do anything I desire. Anything. The stranger bent over Calvin, his eyes alight with wicked joy. Anything. You just about ready? Parker asked as he joined them at the contraption. Topplepot stood and nodded. It looks like your entire population has turned out for this. And the man spoke the truth. Word had spread like some fast-acting plague, and every single citizen was there to see if the stranger could make good on his word. Well, $1,000 is a fairly steep price. We're all very excited to see if you can pull this off. Cocking his head at the sheriff, the tall man asked, You doubt me, sir? Not at all. Good, then, the man said as he adjusted his levers and pulled the pulleys, because you, good sirs, are about to get your money's worth. With that, Topplepot turned the hand crank, and the same soft tune from that morning played, only this time it was a great deal louder. Calvin, as well as many of the other townsfolk, covered his ears, wincing at the mind-numbing volume of the comical music. This should be loud enough, Topplepot shouted over the cacophony, to reach from farm to ranch, all across your town. Calvin's dad, who was also covering his ears, for those closest to the calliope were getting the loudest dose, nodded at the stranger. Shrieks and shouts faded in and out over the music as the rats poured out from all sides, heading to the wagon, from both directions of the street, from far-off farms and overrun ranches. A brown and black and gray ocean of fur and teeth and beady red eyes surged toward the man and his machine. All the while the music ground on and on. Topplepot's strange smile took him again as he shouted, You best get out of the road. Let me handle this. After all, it's what you're paying me to do. Calvin's dad yanked his son by the neck of his shirt, scooping Calvin up just before the swell of rats could overtake him. The townsfolk stood on the porches and steps all along the roadside, watching in wonder as rats upon rats upon rats scrambled to get to the source of the music. A squirming, living flood poured down Main Street as the source of the town's worry came to seek its own doom. For several minutes the music played, drawing in its quarry, drowning its prey in the sweet, seductive tune. Like a sharp slap to the face, a sudden silence landed on the crowd. Topplepot adjusted his levers just before he started the music again, turning the crank as he shouted to the rats, "Get on out of here! I'm done with you. Go on, take your rest now." The rats obeyed by splitting into 2 packs, turning tail and fleeing town by either end of the road. It didn't take long for the vermin to reach the limits of the town proper, where, one by one, the bursting began. This time, things weren't quite far enough away for the dramatics of a simple red cloud. No, this time, every bursting rat was accompanied by the horrible visual of dripping death and the stench of steaming life spilt on the dry earth. But regardless of what happened to their brothers only steps ahead of them, the rats behind marched forward to their fate, exploding just as they reached the outskirts of town, until every last one of them was gone. Topplepot released his crank, the music stopped, the town fell quiet. "Ladies and gentlemen," Topplepot said, "that, as they say, is that." A great whoop went over the small crowd. Applause thundered in Calvin's ears as the townspeople rejoiced in the man's wonderful accomplishment. Topplepot was all smiles and modesty, nodding at the heartfelt shouts of gratitude, waving at the appreciation. Parker was the first to approach the man again, his hand held out. "May I be the first," the sheriff said, "to thank you for this glorious thing you've done for us." "Trust me," Topplepot said, taking the sheriff's hand, "when I say it was entirely my pleasure. You, sir, are welcome to stay in Flats as long as you need, free of charge, of course." "Of course. Speaking of charges, I know it may seem a bit gauche to ask for my fee now, but—" Topplepot paused, letting the words linger, a verbal hand seeking what now belonged to him. Parker slid alongside him, patting the taller man on the back as he tried to lead the stranger back toward the tavern. "Nonsense! Get yourself a good night's rest, and we'll talk all about that in the morning." Topplepot stood firm. "I'd like to discuss it now, if you don't mind." "Please, let's just—" "I get the distinct impression you don't wish to discuss my fee." "That's because we don't have your money," Calvin's dad interjected. "Excuse me?" Topplepot asked. "David!" Parker snapped. Calvin's dad stepped down from his store to stand eye to eye with the man he'd helped deceive. "We don't have your money. I'm very sorry, sir." Topplepot stood, his head in confusion. "Sorry? You promised me my wages for my work. You made an oral contract." Calvin's dad eyed the rest of the lying townsfolk as he said, "We don't have $1,000. We don't even have 10. Parker snatched Calvin's dad by the wrist. "We had a plan." Calvin's dad jerked his arm away. "You had a plan." He turned back to the stranger with a sigh. "We're a very poor town, Mr. Topplepot, but we're proud. We took advantage of you, and we will do whatever it takes to make up for that mistake. Won't we, Mitch?" Sheriff Parker, now red as a pickled beet, nodded but said nothing. "Yes, you will," Topplepot said. Calvin thought it odd that the man's words weren't a question or even a shocked repetition. It was a declaration that made the young boy's skin crawl to hear. Calvin's dad pressed on with his apology. "We can scrape together some supplies, some feed for your oxen, a few knickknacks that might fetch you something in the city. It won't meet your fee, but our gratitude is genuine, and you can always return here any time you like." "I appreciate your honesty," Topplepot said, "but I would have appreciated it more before I kept my part of the bargain. Still, I suppose it's refreshing to see a semi-honest man. Then you'll allow us to make it up to you? Calvin's dad asked. Topplepot grinned. I think there are a few things in your lovely town I can make use of. Something valuable to me, but even more so to you, I would wager. Nonsense, by all means, consider it yours. Oh, I will. Have no doubt about that. Topplepot turned back to his machine and began pulling pulleys, pushing buttons, and flipping switches. What are you doing? Calvin's dad asked. Let him be, Parker said with a snort. What's the worst he can do with that thing? The rats are gone. It's not like he can bring them back. And the music man laughed low and sinister as he adjusted his machine. I just thought I'd share one more tune. Topplepot looked over his shoulder, grinning wide as he added, Free of charge, of course. With that, he turned his crank. A new piece of music filled the air, this time a jaunty little tune that made Calvin want to get up and dance. So he did. Without hesitation, without a thought as to how he looked or acted, he leapt to his feet and began a silly little jig. He didn't even know how to dance, and there he was, capering like a wild goat on a spring morning. And not just him, either. No. Wyatt had leapt from his seat across the road, shimmying and shaking in the dirt. Lucy Stacks was dancing close with Bobby Hanson. The Packard twins were waltzing across the street. In fact, all the kids from town, all 30 so of them, were dancing up a storm right in front of Topplepot and his marvelous invention, all to the tune of a driving, cheerful beat. They were having the time of their young lives. The adults, however, weren't. They started to shout and cry, holler and plead for the children to stop dancing. Stop this madness! Calvin's dad yelled. He grabbed up Calvin, holding him by his shoulders from the ground. But even this didn't stop him. Calvin's feet continued their worship of the music, dancing on air as his father held him high. You! Calvin's dad growled at Topplepot. You're doing this! Topplepot shrugged as he flipped a single switch on the machine. A little tin whistle was added to the jovial music. Calvin's dad went tense, dropping his son to the ground as a strange stiffness settled over him. It was as though he had been glued to the spot by the same tune that Calvin had been dancing to. Calvin glanced up to his father to see a look of worry and shock. He wanted to tell his dad it was all right, that the music made him happy inside, but he couldn't. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Then his father got big, really big. In fact, the whole world got big all around Calvin, because he was shrinking. So were Wyatt and the Packard twins. But they weren't just getting smaller. They were getting hairier and toothier. And Calvin just about knew what was happening when he caught sight of his own long tail. All of the adults watched, frozen to the spot, as their children twisted and danced and shrank into beady little-eyed rats. Rats that snapped and growled. Rats with bright red eyes that spoke of an impossible intelligence. Topplepot laughed as he fiddled with the dials. I warned you, those who don't take my services seriously pay the price, one way or another. A brand new tune reached Calvin's tiny ears, and with it he felt a powerful hunger overtake him. A hunger for meat, raw and chunky, and red with blood. It was unlike anything he'd felt before. It struck him in the belly, driving Calvin to seek sustenance right away. But what could a little rat boy eat? What kind of meat was so plentiful, so within his reach, and so very fresh? Calvin heard his father's cries before he knew what was happening. At the back of his mind, somewhere that used to be the little boy, he knew he was doing wrong. But the meat was oh so tasty, and the music made him oh so hungry. Yet, in truth, the melody had stopped long before. Shrieks were the only music now, as Topplepot turned his attention to the packing away of his glorious machine. Calvin chomped, chewed, and swallowed over and over until he was perched upon nothing but a pile of red raw bones where his dad once stood. How long does it take for a pack of rat children to eat an entire town? Long enough for one man to hitch his wagon team and store his goods. Ready to go, Topplepot turned to his new flock, his smile wider than ever. "Are we all full now?" The rat children tittered with excitement. Topplepot mounted his wagon, settling into the bucket seat as he pulled a penny whistle from his garish jacket. "Meet you at the next town, then. Try not to be so aggressive this time, children." He blew into the whistle, a short, sharp tune, at which Calvin, Wyatt, and all of the town's children scurried away.
You've just heard Calliope, written by Tanya Brown, performed by Otis Geary, and produced by Craig Groshek. It's a story that feels almost folkloric in its simplicity. An outsider arrives, offers salvation, names a price, and warns of consequence. But this isn't a story about vermin. It's about pride, about desperation, about assuming that cleverness can replace honesty, and that help comes without expectation. And in the end, it reminds us that harmony, when placed in the wrong hands, can become something far more dangerous than chaos. Sometimes the cost of a broken promise isn't financial. Sometimes it's everything. Before we close tonight's episode, we'd like to once again spotlight Scary Stories Told in the Dark, now in its 19th season and still delivering weekly nightmares. New episodes premiere every Sunday on the Chilling Tales for Dark Nights YouTube channel, and they're also available wherever your favorite podcasts can be found. With hundreds of episodes in its archive, including a vast library featuring the unforgettable performances of Otis Geary, as well as newer installments hosted by Malcolm Blackwood, there's never been a better time to explore everything the series has to offer. If tonight's story captivated you, we strongly encourage you to dive into the Scary Stories Told in the Dark catalog. There are literally years of terror waiting for you. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, be sure to follow Chilling Tales for Dark Nights on your preferred podcast platform, leave us a 5-star rating, and share the show with a fellow horror fan. Visit creepypastastories.com for even more eerie entertainment, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel to follow the continuing saga of Evil Idol 2025. For exclusive perks, ad-free listening, early access, and bonus content, head to chillingtalesfordarknights.com and become a member today. Just $7.99 per month, or save with an annual subscription. You can also stay connected with us on Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok. You've been listening to Chilling Tales for Dark Nights. I'm Nicholas Goroff, filling in for Steve Taylor tonight. Until next time, turn off the lights and turn on the dark. Sweet dreams, listeners. Sweet dreams.
Chilling Tales for Dark Nights. Chilling Tales for Dark Nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
October, 2:23 a.m., California Highway 99, northbound.
Get your butt down here and visit your boy! You ain't seen him in near a month!
The voice screamed out of the little cell phone speaker. Dale held the phone away from his ear with one hand and kept an ironclad grip on the steering wheel of his Mack truck with the other. His ex-wife's rant was going into overtime, and he wished he knew enough about his new cell phone to know if it had a volume control. I go where the work is. Damn it, Velma. You know that.
Don't give me that crap! That's the same excuse you used to spend time with that whoring!
Her voice faded, and when it roared back, it was punctuated with the static pop. Kill me. Dale brought the phone back up to his ear. What'd you say, Velma?
Don't pretend you don't know who I'm talking about. I know. Oh!
The signal faded again, then came back. The voice panicked. I don't want to die. Can anyone... Please? That didn't sound like Velma. His ex-wife would cut off her tits before she asked anyone for help. Dale held the phone out, glancing at the little screen. The words, "Weak signal," flashed. He brought the phone back to his ear. Velma, what the hell are you talking about? Please help me. It wasn't Velma. This voice sounded younger and terrified. Who is this? The voice dropped in and out. Dale was only getting fragments. Sandra, please. Gonna kill her. I can't move. All right, calm down. Tell me where you are. End of Route 194. Cave. Drag race. Come again? Raced a red spider down Route 194. Can't move. Dead bodies all over. Dale's heart skipped a beat. He held the phone away from his ear as a familiar feeling rumbled in his gut. It felt like standing in front of a large, ominous door that was opening slowly, creaking on old, tired hinges, leading to places Dale never looks for, but always seems to find. He sighed and touched the phone back to his cheek. I'm northbound on the 99. Which way are you on the 194, east or west? No answer. Hey, Sandra, east or west? Silence. Dale pulled the phone away, looking at the tiny screen. No signal. Goddamn Chinese piece of crap! Dale pressed a few buttons on the phone, trying to get the call back, but he didn't really know what he was doing. After a few seconds, Velma's voice popped back in, loud and clear.
That best friend of yours is so dumb he couldn't find his ass with both hands in his pockets.
Jesus, Dale said, then pressed the red button, hoping it would send Velma's voice back to whatever cellular hell it had come from. The connection was cut with a chirp, and Dale tossed the phone toward the passenger seat, where it landed in the box it had come in. Well, that was that. Route 194 stretched across California for miles, without any hint of direction. He didn't have a chance of finding Sandra what's-her-name. He let out a long breath, somewhat relieved that the doorway to places filled with cries for help, dead bodies, and whatever else that had always found him between the ungodly hours of midnight and dawn was closed. Still, as the miles rolled by, he couldn't let it go. Maybe he'd feel better if he told someone. Dale reached down for the CB mic and was thinking about switching to the emergency channel when,
Hey, Twilight Man, you got your ears on? Come back.
Dale grinned at the sound of his friend's voice, Earl, coming out of the CB speaker. He brought the mic to his lips, pressed the call button. This here's the Twilight Man. How you doing, Nightcrawler?
Well, my butt is rawer than a $2 pavement princess and you know what. Other than that, I'm just Ducky. I'm back sliding down the grapevine on the rebound, looking to make camp in Bakersfield. Knew you were in the area. Wondered if you wanted to gather the wagons at a chewing choke for some breakfast. Come back.
Dale looked at his watch. midnight. Sounds good, but hey, listen. I got this call on my cell I'd like to run by you.
Stop the presses. You got your cell phone?
Dale groaned softly. Yes, let's not make a big deal out of it.
Damn, I needs to alert the media. Dale got himself a cell phone. It's like you're joining the human race and everything. Welcome to the 20th century, good buddy,
Earl said. It's the 21st century, numbnuts. Dale glanced over at the phone laying in its packaging. Picked this thing up about an hour ago. Thought I'd try to give my boy a holler since it's his birthday tomorrow. But, of course, Velma picked up.
Oh, you have my condolences,
Earl said.
How is Bitchzilla?
Dale chuckled. Still queen of the harpies. Anyway, someone's voice broke in on the call.
Well, that can happen, especially if you go cheap,
Earl said.
Let me guess. You got a flip phone. One that costs about $11.99? Swear, Dale, you pinch pennies so tight you can hear old Abe Lincoln squealing.
Dale sighed. He hated how well his friend knew him. It was $9.99 and the guy at the truck stop threw in a box of red vines. Now, do you want to hear this or not?
My ears are on. Come back.
Dale quickly recapped what he'd heard before the signal faded. So, what do you think?
Well, that stranger-than-Liberace at a football game. I assumes she was talking about a car. Say like an Alfa Romeo Spider.
Could be, but I don't know. Didn't get that kind of detail.
I wonder if she meant mines.
What was that? Come back, Dale said.
Yeah, you said something about a cave. Maybe she's held up in those mines off the 194, about 2 miles west.
How do you know about mines way out there?
I knows lots of things. I'm not just pretty. There's copper mines. Closed, I think. Don't you remember there was that college kid last year that died while the spelunkering?
Do you mean spelunking?
Yeah, sounds right. No idea what it is, but apparently you can die doing it.
Dale's eyes followed an exit marker. He just passed the turnoff for Route 193 and knew 194 wasn't far away. Just keep on trucking, he told himself. In a few minutes he could be in Bakersfield, enjoying food guaranteed to hurry him along toward an early death. He was getting too old for this shit.
So, what you gonna do, Twilight Man?
Earl's voice popped over the CB. Dale took in a deep breath, letting it out slowly. He was trying to push the terror in the girl's voice from his mind. But, as he exhaled, he realized just how much she had sounded like his youngest niece in Knoxville. The girl's call for help wasn't something he could just drive on by. God damn. Son bitch. He always felt nothing good could come from buying a cell phone. And damn if he wasn't right. With a sour expression on his face, Dale put his turn signal on and steered the rig toward the approaching exit. Route 194. What's your 20? Dale said into the CB after exiting the freeway.
About 35 miles from your back door. Guess breakfast will have to wait. Come back.
Well, drop the hammer, old man. It's too goddamn early for breakfast anyway. Turning on his high beams, Dale exited, then turned west. The dual beams of light cut a path through the darkness, revealing field after field of agricultural endeavors. After 2 miles, the farmland fell away, and rolling hills silhouetted in the soft moonlight rose up on either side of the road. The truck began to vibrate as the tar-covered surface disappeared. Gravel took its place for a few hundred feet. Then that dissolved, leaving just a dirt path. Dale was just about to throw in the towel when at the edge of his high beams, he could see a sign. Hope Mine, 1/2 mile. The sign had a painted arrow indicating a right turn onto another dirt road running south. He brought the truck to a stop in front of the sign and gazed down the southbound path, dark and nameless. Although the sign appeared to be a half-century old, there were a dozen tire tracks, maybe more, some very recent. He steered south, finding that the new dirt road was not much smoother than the other one. His truck shook and vibrated over every hole, kicking up dust. After he had gone the length of several football fields, he could see taillights glinting in his beams. First 1 pair, then 2. Then about a dozen flickered in the darkness, like distant stars. Cars lined the dirt road, and although they looked abandoned sitting in the dark, some caked with dust, they all appeared to be new. Modified street racers, tediously tricked out, resting silently in the night. Their owners, who had obviously spent considerable time and money to make these vehicles look ridiculously fast and furious, were nowhere to be found. What the hell? Dale said. Where's a party? The road ended, and Dale eased the truck over, parking alongside a racing green Acura with a rear foil on it big enough to be used as a surfboard. Not the kind of car likely to be found on a rural dirt road. Just ahead, Dale could see the entrance to the mine. It wasn't what he'd expected. All the images of mines he'd ever seen were products of Hollywood. Big railroad ties framing the entrance to a dingy-looking cave with some kind of sign that usually read, "Danger," or "Keep out." The Hope Mine was more of a hole, and from Dale's point of view, high up in the cab, he could see it burrowing down into a blasted hill at an angle steep enough to make walking difficult, but doable. Dale was already picturing himself sliding on his ass down the gullet of the hole into the waiting arms of God knows what. He fumbled under the seat and reached into a compartment so concealed no scale inspector, border patrol, DEA, or cop would ever discover without completely dismantling the cab. He pulled out a Christmas gift from a few years back, a sawed-off, double-barreled shotgun with a CB handle carved into the stock. His mom always knew what to get him. After stuffing a half-dozen shells in his pocket, he reached behind the seat and grabbed something else he was sure he was going to need. A rope. The CB crackled to life.
"Twilight Man, this is Nightcrawler. Come back."
Dale picked up the mic. "Yeah, what's up, Earl?"
"Good, buddy. You ain't gonna believe this. Guess what just blew my doors off?"
Dale sighed. "I'm a little busy right now. Can we play this game later?"
"It was moving like a bat out of hell. Thought it might even leave the ground."
"Well, what was it?"
"A red spider."
Dale swallowed. Come again?"
"Could have been scarlet, but I swear to God it was redder than a Catholic girl on her wedding night."
"Your eyes on straight?"
"Hell yeah. I'd say it was a 1965 Alfa Romeo hardtop. Did I call it?"
"Yes, you called it. You're very wise."
"And purty."
"I'm willing to bet it wasn't Solo," Dale said.
"No, sir, it was not."
Earl came back.
"How'd you know?"
"Well, you're not the only one who's more than just pretty. What'd you see?"
"Looked like a yellow, could have been white Honda Civic. All souped up, racing alongside. You know them street racing life-size Hot Wheels kids are spending all their coin on?"
Dale looked over the graveyard of cars, any one of which could have been owned by the late Paul Walker. "Yeah, I have a pretty good idea of what you're talking about. Everybody wants to be Vin Diesel."
"What's a Vin Diesel?"
Forget it. Which way'd they go?"
"Heading north. I bet my left nut they're heading your way."
"Yeah, that's a big 10-4. And, why the left nut?"
"Well, I'm extra partial to my right one. Have been ever since I discovered what they were."
"Very sorry I asked. What's your 20?
"I just passed Route 190.
"Geez, Earl, you move slower than turtle shit."
Bitch.
Dale told Earl what he had found and what he planned on doing, even though he hadn't really convinced himself yet.
"You really going down there?"
Earl said. Dale scratched his head, pondering the wisdom of his plan. He brought the mic up to his lips. "You didn't hear that kid's voice. If she were my kin, I'd sure as hell want someone to go after her." He leaned over and removed a flashlight from the glove box.
"You ain't even sure she's down there?"
Dale turned the flashlight on, shining it over the dust-covered cars. "Well, she ain't up here, that's for sure. If you don't find me when you get here, call in the cavalry." Before Earl signed off, he urged Dale to take his cell phone. Dale reluctantly agreed and gave his friend the number. Dale slung the rope over his shoulder and stepped out of the cab. He buttoned up his leather vest, then stepped to the front of his rig. He secured one end of the rope to the bumper, then strolled toward the mine. Upon reaching it, his boots knocked a few rocks down into the darkness. He scanned back up the road that brought him here, checking for approaching headlights. Nothing. Darkness. He wasn't worried about the driver of the Red Spider. Dale could deal with some young punk street racer turned serial killer, if that is what this was. Running cargo across the United States in the dead of night for a living allowed Dale the frequent opportunity to meet a wide variety of assholes. Mr. Alfa Romeo Spider was nothing special, but as he gazed back down into the opening in the earth, the hair on the back of his neck stood up, and he couldn't extinguish the feeling that something was looking back up at him. Something cold, something unfriendly, something ugly. "I'm coming, kid." Dale tossed the rope down, and the blackness seemed to swallow it. He turned on the flashlight, chasing away the dark, and was relieved to see that the floor seemed to level out about 20 feet down into the mine. He gripped the rope and began his descent, boots sliding in loose earth. His 240-plus pounds of muscle and well-fed trucker's physique created an avalanche of gravel, limestone, and thick dust. If there was something down there waiting for him, he had made enough noise to let it know he was coming. With each step, the air got colder, and something else assaulted his senses. A thick stench started to rise, pungent, adding weight and a foul color to the air. It was a recognizable aroma, one Dale had taken in more times than anyone ever should, but his familiarity with the smell didn't desensitize him to it. He gagged, tasted vomit, and his eyes watered as he moved closer to the source of decay and rot. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a handkerchief, tied it around his mouth and nose like a train robber. The metal material did a piss-poor job, but it filtered the stench enough so that his eyes stopped tearing up like a little girl. Preoccupied with not puking, he almost didn't notice that the texture of the walls had changed. He shined the light on both sides and up onto the ceiling, seeing a silky thread weaving its way around the rock. Oh, wonderful. Bugs, he thought. The thread seemed to get thicker the deeper he went. It even started to spread onto the floor, winding over long, horizontal boulders pressed up against the wall. He had passed a half-dozen of these elongated rocks wound up tightly in silk before he realized they weren't boulders. They were bodies. Ah, crap on a cracker. Dale knelt down next to one, peeling away some of the strands with the barrel of the shotgun. It was a strange-looking corpse. It looked like the mummies in the Chicago Museum he got to gawk at as a kid, all dried up, shriveled. But no mummy he ever saw wore a Raiders cap. The light glinted off the NFL logo, and as Dale tapped it with the shotgun, the corpse's jaw dropped open with a crack. Dale stood back up, watching a spider the size of his hand crawl out from the shriveled body's throat. He noticed others crawling about, none larger than his palm. They moved over the bodies, feeding, their fangs pumping up and down, drinking in their meal. Dale narrowed his eyes, his blood beginning to boil. He turned on a heel and started heading deep into the mine. When he could, he adjusted his steps so that each one was followed by a crunching sound, bringing a satisfied grin to Dale's face as spiders died under his alligator skin boots. "Sandra?" he began to call, not giving a crap about being stealthy. If there was something down here wanting a fight, he was in the mood to oblige. Sandra's name echoed down the passage, and Dale could hear it reverberating for miles. He checked every body he passed for signs of life, knocking spiders to the ground with the barrel of his gun. The bodies were in various stages of decomposition, some looking very fresh, but none were alive. He stopped to deliver an occasional twist of the heel as arachnids died underfoot, but he began to notice that the further he went into the belly of this nest, the more eight-legged bastards there were to crush. He burped out a sigh, beginning to feel defeated. If he went much deeper, they might grow so numerous he wouldn't be able to dispatch them with a simple twist of the boot. They were already starting to drop onto his arms and shoulders from the ceiling. Damn it! On the verge of turning back, his flashlight caught something silver and metallic on the ground. A smartphone. A hand lay on the dirt floor, still and close to the phone. Dale followed the arm up to its silk-cocooned body hanging from the ceiling. Enough silk strands had been torn away that an arm had managed to get free. Even beneath the wrapping, Dale could see that this body was fresher than the rest. Dale stepped over and pulled at the tightly wound silk around the torso. Big glittering letters in the girl's t-shirt read, "American Idol." He placed 2 fingers on her jugular. Nothing. He checked again. Still nothing. He bent down and retrieved the phone. A name was printed on the protective case. Sandra Cleveland. Damn. I'm sorry, Sandra. Just not quick enough. Dale swatted at the spiders that had their fangs in her, then crushed a few under his boot, cursing. He was just twisting his heel on the last one when he heard the sound of engines. At least 2. He wiped his feet in the dirt, grinning. Now let's go deal with Mr. Serial-killing, spider-loving son of a bitch. With the shotgun over his shoulder, he began to jog back toward the entrance. The sounds of the cars were getting louder, engines revving. By the time he reached the rope near the entrance, one of the engines had been killed. A voice drifted down the holes as Dale climbed up.
I beat you, bitch! Now, get out of that historical artifact you call a car!
Dale reached the mouth of the mine and stepped up into the night. The first thing he saw was a teenage male, just old enough to shave, wearing an oversized sweatsuit, an unnecessary amount of gold chains around his neck, and a cap with the bill pointed backward. He was jumping up and down, and every few seconds he would perform some ludicrous dance move that the white kid clearly believed he had mastered.
Beat you fat and square, I beat you fat and square,
the teenager said, moving away from his modified street racer, a Honda Civic, with a chrome blower rising from the hood. He walked and sort of danced over the Italian car, a red Alfa Romeo Spider.
Come on out! Let's see you losing biatch ass.
The Spider just idled patiently as if it were waiting for something. Its black-tinted windows seemed to be keeping all its owner's secrets, and, as Dale stared at it, a chill moved through his body. It suddenly occurred to him that there may be more than one shithead in the Spider. 2, maybe 3 he could deal with, but if there were more and they were armed, he decided to conceal himself, watch a while, and see what he was up against. He crouched down behind a pile of rocks just outside the mine's entrance as the teenager continued to taunt the driver of the Spider.
Hey, you gonna show yourself or what? It's time to pay up, bitch! Let's see the pink slip!
The teenager kicked the front tire of the Alfa Romeo. The Spider's engine revved, and the kid took several steps back. The engine roared again, and the car began to vibrate violently, looking like a rocket moments before leaving the launch pad. Dale felt the ground trembling beneath him. The teenager held up his hands as if he suddenly realized where he was, in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by derelict streetcars.
You know what? Just keep it, man.
He took 2 more steps back.
I don't want that antique roadshow anyhow.
Before the kid took another step backward, the engine suddenly switched off. The roar faded with a suddenness that took Dale by surprise. And then, the Spider was still. Dale stared at the car's windows, looking for movement. Nothing.
So, all right then,
the teenager said, tugging at his cap.
I'll catch up with you on the road, biatch.
The hardtop roof of the Spider began to move, accompanied by a high-pitched mechanical whine. The roof opened like the hood of a car. Dale rubbed his hairy chin. No idea Alfa Romeos could do that. The roof continued up and back until it lay flat on the trunk. The machinery that moved it cut off at the choke, creating a cold silence. The teenager took a step forward.
That is sick! You tricked that yourself?
Out of the opening in the Spider, a female head started to rise like a disembodied apparition. Long hair spun over her scalp, so black it melted into the night. A slender, creamy-skinned neck bled into smooth, naked shoulders. Her hands rose, gripping the top of the windshield. The teenager smiled at her. "Hey, babe. You know I don't really want this time machine." He pointed at the spider. "Maybe we could work something else out? You know what I'm saying?" The woman smiled back, her black lips framing white teeth. She ascended further, revealing round, naked breasts, nipples hard and gray. "Oh yeah," the teenager said, stepping forward. "I like a woman that drives commando." "Watch yourself, kid," Dale muttered softly. She rose up even more, as if being lifted on a hydraulic platform. The teenager suddenly stopped moving forward. What the? Another set of breasts hung beneath the first, and another under them. The woman's engorged chest looked like a sow that had recently given birth, with gray nipples descending the length of her torso. The teenager pointed a finger. "You freaky bitch! Stay the fuck!" Something else emerged out of the Alfa Romeo. Long, thick, hairy. "Oh shit," Dale said. One by one, 8 hair-covered legs, each the girth of an adult python, uncoiled from the car's interior. They stretched out as if waking from a long hibernation, then began to plank their arachnid feet on the dirt. The creature lifted itself out of the car, looking like something out of Greek mythology gone haywire. From the waist up, it resembled a human female, but everything else was arachnid. With multiple leg joints and thick brushes of hair, it scurried away from the Alfa Romeo, its dark eyes at least 8 feet above the ground, peering at the teenager. The boy who had been so animated only a minute ago seemed frozen in place, paralyzed in the creature's Medusa-like gaze. He didn't attempt to run, even when it scurried toward him. Its front legs bucked up, enveloping the boy. He was lifted off the ground, and 4 hairy legs began to spin his body. Silk shot out of the ass end of the creature, and within a few seconds, the boy was mummified, cocooned, for her children's consumption. The 8-legged monster then began to move toward the mine, its wrapped-up prize dragging behind. Dale hunkered down as much as his large body would allow, gripping the stock and barrel of the shotgun so tight his knuckles were pearl white. He knew the shotgun's kill range was less than 10 feet, but he wasn't looking forward to getting that close. God damn it, Earl, where the hell are you? All 8 legs came to a stop at the mouth of the mine. Its human half started to lean forward, and for a second, Dale thought she was just crouching to fit through the entrance. But he was wrong. The creature bent all the way forward, its human hand picking up something off the ground. It was Dale's rope. Her head and torso came back up, the rope gripped in both hands. Her black eyes seemed to follow the length of the rope tethered to Dale's truck. Well, shit. Dale readied the shotgun. So much for a surprise attack. Anger, vile and terrifying, consumed the creature's face. It started moving toward the truck, its human hands coiled into fists. After only a few yards, it stopped, the anger melting away to what Dale thought was concern, as if she just realized the rope also descended into her burrow, her nest. She sniffed at the air, like a wolf catching the scent of blood on a wounded animal. She cut loose her latest prize, lowered her head, and scurried down into the mine. The teenager's wrapped-up body rolled down a slope and out of sight. Dale waited a few seconds for the hair on the back of his neck to relax, then stood up, letting out a long breath he wasn't even aware he'd been holding. He stepped from behind the pile of rocks and made for his cab, already picturing himself sitting safely within its confines. He'd much rather shoot down at the thing from inside his truck, or better yet, catch the beast in a crossfire from high up with Earl and his .38 on one side, and him on the... A blood-curdling scream that was only part human exploded from the mine. Dale whirled around, shotgun at his hip as the anguished cries echoed behind him. Damn it, Earl, I could use some help here. Okay, nothing to panic about. Dale told himself. The bitch didn't see me up here, so she probably thinks I'm still in the hole somewhere. Just keep quiet, and a loud chirping noise shattered Dale's thought. He spun around looking for the source, which seemed to be behind him. After spinning a half circle, the chirping was behind him again. He did another fast 180, scanning the entrance of the mine for a few tense seconds. Then, he finally realized what it was. Goddamn phone. He pulled the cell phone from his back pocket, desperately trying to make it be quiet. He flipped it open and after pressing several buttons, finally hit the green one. The screen lit up. The chirping stopped. He was about to whisper something into the phone when he realized that whispering was no longer necessary. Eyeshine glinted deep within the gullet of the mine, and it was moving toward him.
Dale, you there?
Earl's voice squeaked out of the tiny speaker. Dale didn't answer, just took several steps back, shotgun leveled at the mine's entrance in one hand, cell phone in the other.
Hey, good buddy. I'm at your back door,
Earl said.
Find anything?
Dale held the phone in front of his face and said, A bug. A big fucking bug. He threw the phone into the mine and saw it bounce off the beast's chest. He gripped the barrel of the shotgun, anchoring the stock on his hip, just as the 8-legged monstrosity exited her lair. Pausing as it emerged, its back legs still lost in the mine's entrance, the beast seemed to know what Dale held in his hands, and it stood still, hissing, contemplating. She tilted her head, lowered her chin, and glared deep into Dale's eyes. The creature cast no visible shadow in the thin moonlight, but Dale felt himself being enveloped by it anyway, cold and scurrying up his spine. They stood motionless, like two gunfighters waiting for that undeniable moment demanding split-second reactions. My God, you're 500 pounds of ugly, Dale said. The creature slowly began to circle and hissed in a low, guttural tone, sounding not unlike his ex-wife. Geez, I want to hear a woman hiss me all night long. I'll go visit my boy. Dale rotated with her, keeping the shotgun aimed at her chest. He judged her to be about 15 feet away, just a bit too far to do terminal damage, but he wasn't about to take a step forward. As it turned out, he didn't have to. What you waiting on, Christmas? Let's dance, bitch. The 8-legged beast lowered her head like a bull, thrust her human hands forward, and charged, howling like hellspawn. Dale counted to 2, held his breath, then let go with both barrels. The explosions echoed down the mine as the beast pitched back, hands clasping her chest. When her hands fell, Dale could see one of her upper breasts was gone, and an arm hung by cartilage and sinew. Blood splattered her torso, flowing down onto hairy legs. She thrust a raised hand forward, clawing at the air, looking more enraged than ever. Dale took quick steps backward, pulling 2 more rounds from his pocket. He had to lower his eyes for a split second as he popped the shells into the chamber. When he brought them back up, a hairy leg struck him in the jaw. He felt his feet leave the ground and heard his gun go off. He sailed several yards through the air and then hit something hard. What he'd landed on bent inward under his weight, and it took a hazy second to realize he wasn't on the ground. He had landed on the hood of the Alfa Romeo. The she-bitch scurried toward him, rising up on her back legs, teeth bared. Dale pointed the shotgun, not really aiming, and pulled the trigger. The soft sound of the hammers falling atop the empty chambers was, at that moment, the worst sound in the world. Oh shit. Dale sat up, digging into his pocket for more shells. He saw her hand reaching toward him, and he swatted at it with the stock of the gun. She blocked his blow, knocking the shotgun from his grasp. She reached down and clasped Dale around the neck, lifting his ass off the hood. She pulled his face to hers, opening her mouth. For a second, Dale thought she intended to sink her teeth right into the bridge of his nose. He could taste her breath, foul, rank with rot. Then something seemed to catch her attention. Her eyes moved past Dale, and he felt her grip loosen. He wasted no time. He brought both fists down on her wounded arm. The creature howled, and Dale fell from her grasp, landing back on the hood with a thud. Pain rocketed through the back of his head as a familiar sound echoed in the night, rumbling, growing close. Dale rolled off the hood just as Earl's 18-wheeler plowed into the Alfa Romeo like a freight train, horn blaring. The crash was deafening. Sparks flew as big as muzzle flashes. Metal-tearing screeches exploded into the night. Dale kept rolling in the dirt as Earl's trailer rushed by. He got a quick glance of the arachnid bitch raising her human hands in a vain attempt to slow down 15 tons of speeding metal. With the Alfa Romeo as a hood ornament, Earl's truck bulldozed into the creature, its hairy legs leaving the ground. The 18-wheeler began to slide as the brakes were applied, but it didn't stop before smashing into a rocky, man-made hill, piled high with unwanted material excavated from the Hope mine. The creature was pinned between the rocky hill and the crumpled frame of the Alfa Romeo. Earl's truck seemed to stand guard over the scene, pushing forward enough to keep the arachnid in her place, crushed in a tangle of broken black legs and twisted metal. Dale popped himself up into a sitting position as Earl stepped out of the cab. He had never been so happy to see his friend.
Took you long enough? You cruised the granny lane all the way here, did you?
Earl walked over to Dale, hand extended.
You never could appreciate a proper entrance.
Dale grabbed his friend's hand and allowed himself to be pulled up. Thanks, old man. Earl stood a few inches taller than Dale, and many pounds heavier.
Well, I was in the neighborhood.
Dale smiled and walked over to get his shotgun.
Can I assume breakfast is on you?
Earl said. Yeah. Dale gathered up his weapon. And not the usual cheap Denny's Grand Slam, neither. A real fine and proper breakfast. Dale walked back, slapped an arm around Earl's shoulder.
I'd take you to the Russian tea room about now if I could.
Earl tugged on his black Harley-Davidson t-shirt.
Well, we're a bit underdressed.
They both stared for a few silent moments at the carnage at the far side of Earl's front bumper. The creature squirmed in front of them. Two of its long legs still moved just outside the crushing pressure of Earl's truck. Its female head lay over the top of the rocky hill, blood drooling down the sides of her mouth. Earl stepped forward, taking a hard look.
Christ, Dale, you sure do have a knack for finding the meanest, ugliest women.
Well, it's a gift.
Well, you ought to think serious about giving it back.
Earl scratched his head.
What the hell's that?
Dale had heard of these creatures. Mostly just whispers in the night, really. I think they're called Homo arachnus. Part people, part bug. Were spiders, if you want. Think the last one on record died off in the 50s, along with them giant desert ants. Military took 'em out. Well, at least that's the rumor.
Well, that rumor is in need of a status update.
Earl looked over at the mine entrance.
Oh, anyone alive down there?
Nothing on two legs. Dale pointed down the slope. There's a kid down there in a silk wrapper. Probably just napping. Looks like Spider Bitch liked to stun her prey.
I'll go take a look,
Earl said, then pointed over at the crushed beast.
Why don't you go and say goodnight to Gracie?
Dale nodded and strolled toward the rocky hill. He pulled 2 shells from his pocket and loaded the shotgun. Closing the chamber, he climbed up and around the uppermost part of the hill, where the creature's head lay. Its black hair spilled out onto the dirt like crude oil, and Dale placed a boot on a few healthy strands, inches from her scalp. She tried to raise her head up, but Dale's boot held it down by its midnight-colored locks. She looked at him and hissed, blood spotting his jeans. In these final moments, Dale could never despise these things. Not much, anyway. It was just an unnatural thing, doing what unnatural things were made to do. But now, it was time for Dale to do what Dale was made to do. He leaned over, placed both barrels up against her forehead. Say goodnight, Gracie. He pulled the trigger.
Tales for Dark Nights.